Hey everyone, welcome back. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Sword of Coming audio series. Chapter 1021. Fights are inevitable. After practicing his walking meditation for a while, Chen Pingan hesitated momentarily, then ultimately decided to leave his residence and return to the pergola on the dragon-slaying cliff. There he stood with his fist cupped, intentionally releasing his fist intent. Soon the old woman came hobbling her way up the mountain with a smile as she asked, "Can I help you with something, young Master Chen?" "Sorry to disturb your rest, Granny Bai, but there are some questions that I wanted to ask you and I couldn't wait," Chen Pingan said with a guilty expression. "There's no need to be so formal and uptight, young Master Chen," the old woman said with a smile. "We're family, so don't be so distant. Otherwise, you're going to make me upset." After the old woman sat down, Chen Pingan said with a solemn expression, "I can see that the Ning Manor has become almost completely deserted after the passing of the two seniors. May I ask what's become of the Yao Manor?" The old woman was silent for a moment, then replied, "To answer that question, I'll have to tell you a bit of a long story. Back when Mistress Yao first decided to marry into the Ning clan, everyone in the Yao clan disapproved because the Ning clan had fallen from grace. At the time, Master Ning's cultivation base wasn't anything special, nor was he displaying the potential to become a sword immortal. If that were the extent of his shortcomings, then it wouldn't have been a huge problem. The Yao clan wasn't so materialistic that it would get in the way of true love, just because Master Ning wasn't necessarily destined for great things. The problem was that the Yao clan had requested the Taoist sage presiding over the city to examine the 8 characters of the two to see if they were a good fit for each other, and the outcome had been less than stellar. Hence, the Yao clan staunchly refused to support this marriage, even when the Ning clan offered up this dragon-slaying cliff as a marriage gift. As a result, Mistress Yao married into the Ning clan without any fanfare or approval from her seniors. Master Ning was never one to bring up the matter, but it was clear that he had always felt guilty toward Mistress Yao, feeling as if he were indirectly at fault for her estrangement from her clan. Even after Master Ning reached the upper 5 tiers, the Yao clan remained cold and distant, and there wasn't anything that Master Ning could do about it. The damage had simply already been done. Over the years, he was unable to shake this feeling of guilt, but no matter how much he tried to persuade her, Mistress Yao refused to return to her clan unless absolutely necessary, and on the future occasions that she did go back, it was only to discuss business and official matters. They were only separated by 2 streets, but interactions between the 2 clans were rarer than those between a pair of sworn enemies. Only after young Mistress Ning Yao was born did the relationship between the 2 clans begin to improve. After Master Ning and Mistress Yao's departure, the Yao clan harbored very mixed feelings toward young Mistress Ning, particularly her maternal grandparents. They felt a great deal of sympathy for her, and when they could see her, they were concerned for her, but whenever they did see her, they felt a sense of pain and grief. Young Mistress Ning doesn't bear much of a resemblance to her mother, but their eyes may as well have been cast out of the exact same mold. Truth be told, even though I'm just a lowly servant, even I can't help but feel disgruntled whenever I think of the circumstances surrounding the marriage between Master Ning and Mistress Yao. But when it comes to young Mistress Ning, it would be unfair to levy too much criticism against the Yao clan. They had already done everything they could for her. The only thing that was missing was the usual care and affection that one would expect to receive from their seniors. There are many past stories between the Ning clan and the Yao clan that are both worth telling, but also rather inconsequential. What I've said so far may have put the Yao clan in a bad light in your eyes, but in reality they're all good and kind people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to raise an extraordinary woman like Mistress Yao. Chen Pingan silently committed all of this to memory. Back when young Mistress Ning was first born, Master Ning almost named her Yao Ning, claiming that it was a more auspicious name than Ning Yao, one with better connotations, the old woman continued. Mistress Yao opposed the idea, and the 2 of them had never fought before that, but they got into an argument over the matter. Afterward, it was decided that young Mistress Ning would draw lots to decide her name. 2 items were placed down in front of her: a beautiful skirt, a dagger, and a small piece of dragon-slaying platform. The skirt dagger was an item in Mistress Yao's dowry. Master Ning proposed that if their daughter grabbed the skirt dagger first, Then she would have the Yao surname, and she would be given the Ning surname if she grabbed the dragon-slaying platform first instead. After some deliberation, young Mistress Ning ended up grabbing the piece of dragon-slaying platform first. That's the same piece of dragon-slaying platform that was eventually given to you, young Master Chen. At the time, Mistress Yao had been very pleased. Mistress Yao very rarely smiled, even as a child. For her, a slight upturn of the corner of her lips could be considered a smile, but on that occasion, she was smiling from ear to ear when young Mistress Ning chose the dragon-slaying platform. Master Ning grew up under far more difficult circumstances than Mistress Yao, forced to shoulder the burden of the already downtrodden Ning clan from a very young age. On top of that, he had to defend that dragon-slaying cliff alongside the rest of the Ning clan's sizable estate. As a young man, his cultivation base was still lacking, so he had begged many favors from others to help him protect the Ning clan's wealth, and he suffered extensively as a result. Despite that, he was always very polite and respectful to everyone and perpetually wore a warm smile. Hence, you can say that young Mistress Ning resembles both of her parents in different regards. I met Senior Ning and Mistress Yao on Stalactite Mountain once last time, Chen Pingan replied with a nod. Only once? The old woman asked with a meaningful smile. Chen Pingan was perplexed, but the old woman didn't elaborate. Instead, she changed the subject as she self-reprimanded. Please pardon me for going off on such a long tangent, young Master Chen. You mentioned that you had something to ask me? Go ahead. Ning Yao has always been perfectly capable of looking after herself, whether it be here or back when she was traveling the majestic world, Chen Pingan began. Hence, I'm worried that by being here, not only will I not be of any help to her, but I could also serve as a distraction and place her in danger. Hence, I can only implore you and Grandpa Nayland to be extra vigilant. Chen Pingan rose to his feet, then cupped his fist in an apologetic salute as he said in an earnest manner, If we encounter another assassin of the same caliber as the one who was able to inflict these injuries upon you, I would gladly lay down my life to protect Ning Yao, but I'm worried that even if I do, my efforts will ultimately prove to be futile. The old woman seemed to have been rather taken aback, and she was silent for a moment before smiling as she said, It's very good to see you being so straightforward with me. This is how family should be. And it's also very admirable that you're willing to openly admit your own shortcomings for the sake of young Mistress Yao. You're very much like Master Ning was in this regard. The old woman lowered her head and dabbed at her eyes as she spoke. Chen Pingan's hands balled up into tight fists that he pressed forcefully against his legs as he said in a trembling voice, I haven't been able to do anything for Ning Yao in all these years that we've been apart. Shut your mouth before I beat some sense into you. Someone suddenly scolded from outside the pergola. It was none other than Nayland Yeshing, the old steward of the Yao Manor. Chen Pingan turned his gaze to the old man in silence. The old man made his way into the pergola, then sat down as he asked, Did you not hold up your end of the 10-year agreement? From this day forth, for as long as you live, are you not willing to stand up for young Mistress Ning and protect her with your life? If you can sincerely say yes to both of those questions, then what do you have to feel guilty about? Do you think it's only true love if two people are constantly together, thinking about nothing but affection and romance? Back when you were last here, I told Master Ning that we should keep you here on the Sword Chi Great Wall to put you through some hard training. At the very least, we should have only allowed you to leave after you attained a bonded flying sword. How are you going to become a sword immortal if you're not even a swordsman? Before the old man had a chance to continue, the old woman punched him in the shoulder as she hissed in a furious voice, Be quiet. You're going to wake up young Mistress Ning if you don't shut up. Do you think being loud gives you more authority and credibility? Guess what? It doesn't work like that on the Sword Chi Great Wall. If you've got so much to say, why don't you go out and yell on the city walls? Do you remember how pathetic you were at young Master Chen's age? That punch from me just now would have been enough to send you flying and have you howling in pain. Shut the hell up. The old man's aura and flair instantly faded, reverting him back into the same quiet and hobbled old man as before, and he could only raise a hand to massage his sore shoulder in silent indignation. It wasn't that he lacked conviction in what he was saying. Instead, he simply knew that trying to reason with an angry woman was only going to be an exercise in futility. Even if he had 100 bonded flying swords in his possession, none of them would be helping his cause here in the slightest. Chen Pingan took a deep breath, then smiled as he said, There's one more question that I want to ask you, Granny Bai. Go ahead, the old woman prompted as her enraged expression instantly turned to a benevolent smile. Ask all the questions that you want, young Master Chen. For old farts like us, we have nothing but time on our hands, especially for a crippled swordsman like Nalin Yeshing. If you didn't know any better, you'd wonder if he was allergic to cultivation. The old man was clearly already accustomed to Bai Lianshang's scathing insults, as evidenced by the fact that not only was he not disgruntled in the slightest, but he couldn't even be bothered to put on an indignant display. If, in the worst-case scenario, the Sword Qi Great Wall falls, what will become of the Ning Manor? Chen Pingan asked. The two elderly individuals exchanged a glance with each other. Of course, that's definitely not something that I wish to see, but it's not a possibility that we can ignore, Chen Pingan continued. Hence, I plan to take part in the next battle when the demon tribe attacks next, so I can personally get a grasp on the power of the enemy that we're dealing with. Rest assured, I may not be able to slay many enemies, but I'm decently confident in my ability to look after myself, and I definitely won't be a burden to anyone. I only wish to remain by Ning Yao's side during the battle as an added layer of security. A concerned look appeared on the old woman's face as she sighed. It's not that we don't have faith in your abilities, young Master Chen, but we've seen far too many mishaps take place on the battlefield south of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The battles here are completely different from anything you would have experienced in the majestic world. I understand that you've faced many formidable foes in the past, but have you ever experienced what it's like to be on a battlefield all on your own, surrounded by enemies in all directions? As soon as you set foot on the battlefield south of the city, you could end up surrounded by hundreds, even thousands of enemies at a moment's notice. Chen Pingan rose to his feet as he smiled and said, You were too considerate of me earlier, Granny Bai. This time, please enlighten me in a true sparring match in which you keep your cultivation base at the pinnacle of the far-roaming tier the entire time. The old man couldn't help but chuckle at Chen Pingan's assertion that the old woman had been too considerate of him. The old woman threw a punch at him without even turning around, and the old man ducked his head to the side to evade her fist. Please pardon me then, young Master Chen. The old woman apologized in advance as she also rose to her feet. Even if young Mistress Ning isn't going to be happy about it, I'm going to have to take this a bit more seriously. Chen Pingan nodded as he sprang out of the pergola, and by the time he landed on the ground, he had already rolled up his sleeves and adopted a fist stance. I'm also going to be going all out this time, Granny Bai. I certainly wouldn't expect anything less, young Master Chen, the old woman chuckled, but she was in no hurry to emerge from the pergola. The old man stood up as he turned to Chen Pingan and gave an internal nod of approval. Pure martial artists were a very rare sight on the Sword Qi Great Wall. He could immediately tell that Chen Pingan was a young martial artist who possessed a tremendous foundation, as opposed to someone who was all style and no substance. For many young prodigies, their cultivation base alone would be enough to intimidate many people, but it depended on whether this cultivation base was built upon a strong foundation. Throughout the history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, there had been countless prodigious swordsmen who had come here with immense pride and lofty aspirations, only to be utterly humiliated, and the majority of them came from the northern complete reed continent. All of them had been stuck-up troublemakers looking to make a name for themselves, only to be beaten into submission before they even made it onto the Sword Qi Great Wall. However, that didn't mean that the people of the Sword Qi Great Wall intentionally picked on outsiders. In fact, there was an unspoken rule, which was that challenges issued to outsiders could only be issued by those of the same cultivation base. If an outsider could win one battle, then that was already a decent achievement, but perhaps there could have been some element of luck involved. If they could win 2 battles, then it would be clear that they could put their money where their mouth was, and only after 3 battles had been won would those on the Sword Qi Great Wall acknowledge them as a true prodigy. Chao Ci had been given the same treatment during his visit to the Sword Qi Great Wall, but he was able to win 3 battles in a row using just a single hand. However, the unspoken rules in place were detrimental to the young prodigies of the Sword Qi Great Wall, as only those at or below the abode tier were able to challenge Chao Ci. The first 2 challengers hadn't even taken part in any battles outside of the Sword Qi Great Wall, so they fought in a very barbaric and unskilled fashion, using their bonded flying swords like glorified battering rams. Only Chao Ci's third opponent was a true prodigy, and even at a young age, He was already a veteran on the battlefield south of the city, but that still didn't spare him the fate of being defeated by a single-handed Chao Ci. However, the outcome of those 3 battles hadn't created much of a stir on the Sword Chi Great Wall at the time. After all, Chao Ci's cultivation base was still nothing special back then. What truly brought Chao Ci to the attention of the Sword Immortals on the Sword Chi Great Wall was the fist intent that he had displayed while practicing his fist techniques daily atop the city walls. In contrast with the Chao Ci of old, Chen Pingan had come to the Sword Chi Great Wall as a Vajrabadi tier martial artist, and he had openly walked into the Ning Manor without making any effort at concealment. This was naturally a fantastic thing, but it could also lead to a lot of trouble. Furthermore, he was staying at the Ning Manor, essentially making an open declaration of his relationship with Ning Yao to everyone, and that had Nalin Yeshing feeling very concerned. There were bound to be many disgruntled young men out there itching to teach him a lesson, so as soon as he left the manor, conflicts would be sure to arise. Chen Pingan could choose to cower, but in doing so, he would be seen as an embarrassment and reduced to a laughingstock of the entire Sword Chi Great Wall. If he chose to rise to the occasion, then even if he could endure the first 2 trials, his third opponent was undoubtedly going to be very formidable. At the very least, they would be on the same level as the likes of Yan Zhua and Chan Sanxiu, perhaps even a young golden courtier swordsman superior to them. Furthermore, they were undoubtedly going to be under 30 years of age. That person was definitely going to be an exceptional prodigy who possessed power and battlefield experience in equal measure, such as the arrogant little runt from the Qi clan who had always thought himself to be above everyone else. Nalin Yeshing took a glance at the old woman. Bai Lianchuang was someone who was blessed with tremendous martial fortune. However, she had a very stubborn personality, and she chose to be loyal to her mistress and the Yao clan her entire life. Otherwise, given her aptitude and cultivation base, she could have easily earned herself a much higher status in any other prominent clan. As a result of her choice, she had turned from a vibrant young woman into a stodgy middle-aged maid who constantly wore a stern expression, then a grumpy old woman with a full head of white hair. Nalin Yeshing was older than her and also higher in seniority, and he had personally witnessed her transformation over the years. He felt some pity for her, and that was why he was willing to concede in many of their minor arguments. Otherwise, there was no way that they would have been able to keep this dragon-slaying cliff before Ning Yao's father grew up to take the reins. With a gentle tap of her foot, the old woman drifted out of the pergola, seemingly as light and innocuous as a feather, only to abruptly crash down to the ground in an instant. The earth shuddered beneath her feet, and in the blink of an eye, it was as if she had turned into a tendril of mist. The old man closely observed the battle through narrowed eyes. He had witnessed countless sparring matches between swordsmen, but a battle between martial artists was quite a rare sight, particularly one involving Bai Lianchuang. An exchange of blows took place, and Chen Pingan slid back until his back struck the wall behind him, following which he calmly stepped forward. As for Bai Lianchuang, she had been struck by a kick from Chen Pingan. It was far from a heavy blow, and she was able to easily ward off its residual force with her aura alone, but the fact that she had been struck at all was a point of great significance. The most intriguing part about this wasn't that Chen Pingan had just displayed speed on par with that of a martial artist at the pinnacle of the far-roaming tier. Instead, it was the fact that he had managed to perfectly anticipate the speed and trajectory of Bai Lianchuang's attack, thereby allowing him to land a counter. The old man chuckled. "You weren't kidding about not holding back, kid." Chen Pingan slowly strode forward, but instead of walking directly forward, he diverged slightly to the side as he smiled and said in a modest manner, "Granny Bai was too complacent." All of a sudden, Bai Lianchuang's battle intent had been ignited a little. Even though she had briefly tested Chen Pingan earlier, that had only been a fleeting exchange, and she didn't truly regard him as an opponent that she would have to pay much attention to. However, it seemed that a young martial artist who had managed to withstand 3 punches from an N-tier martial artist was not someone to be taken lightly. The old woman took a barely noticeable step forward, and her fist stance was also rather dainty and subtle, but the fist intent within was certainly nothing to be scoffed at. "Chen Pingan, do you dare to take the initiative to come and attack me?" she challenged with a smile. Chen Pingan strode forward as he performed his 6-step walking meditation, and with his final step, he launched himself forward with a resounding boom, his fist intent cascading around him like a waterfall. The old woman swiveled around and slapped away Chen Pingan's fist, then thrust a palm into his forehead. It seemed like a rather casual and understated palm strike, but it landed with the force of a mallet viciously striking a gong. Even from Nalin Yeshing's perspective, it felt to him like she was no longer holding back. Chen Pingan was sent flying by the palm strike, but not only was his fist intent not interrupted, it only became heavier and denser, swirling around him like deep water. He landed on the ground on a single foot, then slid back several feet without displaying any signs of strain. In the instant that his second foot also made contact with the ground, he took several tiny shuffling steps, and his robes rippled and flapped as he shrugged off the residual fist aura in the old woman's palm strike. At the same time, he adopted his deity drumming technique fist stance while simultaneously imitating the old woman's fist intent, trying to maximize his own fist intent through small and subtle movements, just as she had done earlier. Even now, you're still trying to copy my fist stance? It seems like you truly don't see me as a threat at all, young Master Chen, the old woman remarked with an amused smile. Force of habit, Chen Pingan explained with a wry smile. He was just about to restore his deity drumming technique fist stance when the old woman pounced on the opportunity, springing forward like lightning with one fist tucked to her waist, while the other was fully extended in front of her. To her surprise, this was exactly what Chen Pingan was waiting for, and he threw a counterpunch of his own. Bai Lianshuang's punch connected squarely with his face, but his fist also landed a solid blow on the old woman's forehead. The old woman was able to withstand the blow without backtracking, but some slight bruising had appeared on her forehead. Once again, Chen Pingan slid back until his back was against the wall, following which he crouched down slightly, and his entire body shuddered as he dispelled the old woman's fist aura yet again. As for the blood that was slowly seeping out of his face, he wasn't just pretending to be unfazed by it. Instead, he was truly unfazed. As a matter of fact, the physical punishment made him feel right at home, granting him a sense of familiarity and security. How about from here onward, you use the speed of a 9th-tier martial artist alongside the power of a peak far-roaming tier martial artist? Chen Pingan proposed. Nalin Yeshing had to stop himself from laughing out loud. The old woman was also rather amused, and she wasn't angry or offended at all. Instead, she was simply curious as she asked, "Be honest with me, Chen Pingan. How many other 10th-tier martial artists have you been beaten by aside from the 3 punches that you told me about?" Chen Pingan considered the question for a moment, then replied, "I've been subjected to beatings by 2 other 10th-tier martial artists lasting at least a month. During that time, they pummeled me without pause, only stopping when I was on the brink of death and dragged away to soak in medicinal baths." Nalin Yeshing didn't know what to say to that. The old woman shook her head as she stood up from her fist stance and said, "In that case, there's no need to continue this any longer. If I take this any further, we'll have to prepare a medicinal bath for you in the middle of the night." Even though she had once been a 10th-tier martial artist, even at her peak, she wasn't able to go beyond the thriving Qi tier. This had nothing to do with her aptitude or training methods. Instead, she was simply condemned by her environment. All pure martial artists were naturally suppressed somewhat on the Sword Qi Great Wall, and it was already a huge surprise that she was able to reach the 10th tier at all. It was often said that the swordsmen of the majestic world were completely worthless in the eyes of those on the Sword Qi Great Wall, but on the contrary, all of the pure martial artists of the majestic world who reached the 10th tier were regarded with immense weight and respect. Hence, Bai Lianshuang was already very content with her achievements. Her only regret was that she was never able to spar with another 10th tier martial artist in her prime. As soon as Chen Pingan made that request, he was immediately left regretting it, and he hurriedly tried to make amends as he said, "You've already done more than enough, Granny Bai. Your fist intent has shown me something that I've never seen before, and I'll be sure to benefit immensely from our sparring match." Nalin Yeshing gave a slight nod of approval at Chen Pingan's sensitivity and consideration, while the old woman was grinning from ear to ear. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan ducked to the side in evasion. "Have you no shame?" the old woman snapped as she turned around to glower at the old man. "How could you direct your sword without warning at a junior like this?" Nalin Yeshing paid no heed to her as he turned to Chen Pingan with a smile and said, "That is the level of speed you can expect from the flying swords of all unpolished jade tier swordsmen on our Sword Qi Great Wall. You shouldn't feel disappointed that you weren't able to evade it. In fact, it's already very impressive that you were able to react at all, albeit too late. Chen Pingan cupped his fist in a grateful salute. He had reacted purely on instinct, and in reality, he hadn't even managed to catch a single glimpse of the flying sword. Have a good rest, young Master Chen, the old man said with a farewell wave, then instantly vanished from the pergola. The old woman was also about to depart, but Chen Pingan smiled as he requested, "Can we chat for a while longer, Granny Bai?" The old woman was more than happy to keep him company, and the two of them returned to the pergola together. Chen Pingan wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand, then asked, "Can I drink some wine, Granny Bai?" "Why not? Go right ahead," the old woman replied with a smile. "I'll stand up for you if young Mistress Ning complains." Chen Pingan pulled out a flagon of rice wine, then set it down after taking a few sips, and began telling the old woman about the pure martial artists of the majestic world, as well as what he had seen and experienced in the lotus flower-blessed land. Occasionally, he would stand up and demonstrate the fist stances that he had learned from others. The old woman didn't speak much, instead mostly listening in silence with a faint smile on her face, only contributing a nod here and there. Chen Pingan's demeanor was very calm and steadfast, but there was also a sense of exuberance and excitement about him. Nalin Yeshing was standing in the distance, watching the two in the pergola from afar, and he smiled as he said, "You have just as good an eye for men as your mother did, young Mistress Ning." Ning Yao was standing beside him, trying to maintain an unimpressed facade, but her eyes were glowing with pride and affection as she answered, "Perhaps I'm even better than mother in that regard." After leaving the Ning manor, Ning Yao's group of friends had each returned to their own homes. Yanzhua had returned to his clan's resplendent manor, then chatted extensively with the elderly steward before making his way to a secret chamber that was riddled with mahist mechanisms. There, he fought against 3 puppets comparable in combat prowess to golden courtier swordsmen without using his bonded flying sword. Unsurprisingly, it was a one-sided beating in favor of the puppets. After that, he enjoyed a lavish meal consisting of many precious agrarian and medichinist medicinal ingredients. Just that single meal alone cost a small fortune, but thankfully, Yanzhua was never short on money. After satiating himself, Yanzhua squeezed his own flabby chin with a look of concern on his face. Aoyang had once praised him as someone who had it all. He was so rich at such a young age and had a good personality and a jovial appearance. If he could lose just a little bit of weight, then he would be the perfect embodiment of the word handsome. At the time, Yanzhua had almost been moved to the point of tears, feeling like Aoyang was the only one able to see his brilliance and give him an honest assessment. Meanwhile, Aoyang had been weighing up the hefty money that he had just received with a vibrant smile on his face. The first time Yanzhua left the city to step onto the battlefield with Ning Yao and the others, he discovered that even though the demons of the savage world were inferior in cultivation based to the mechanical puppets in the secret chamber of his clan, they were extremely ruthless and struck fear deep into his heart. As a result of his panic, both of the master swordsmen that his clan had sent to accompany him perished in order to protect him. After returning home, the traumatized Yanzhua was told that he would never have to step on the battlefield again. In fact, he wouldn't even have to get close to the battlefield. This piece of news saddened him, but he also felt like it was for the best. However, Aoyang then paid his clan a visit, and he didn't know what Aoyang said to his seniors, but he was given another chance. However, as soon as he made his way onto the city walls again, his legs immediately began to tremble, as did his conviction. He wasn't even able to keep his flying sword steady, let alone wield it to kill enemies. Thankfully, Aoyang paid him a visit right before he was due to step onto the battlefield, telling him that all he had to worry about was killing enemies on the battlefield, and that Aoyang would personally ensure his survival. Aoyang wouldn't help him slay demons, but he would keep him safe so that he could focus wholeheartedly on battle. If he still didn't dare to go all out even under these circumstances, then he wouldn't be receiving any more chances. Furthermore, Aoyang would never borrow money from him to buy wine again. Even the finest and most expensive wine wouldn't taste good bought using money borrowed from such a coward. What followed was a brilliant redemption for Yanzhua. Even the old ancestors of his clan, who had previously always regarded him with disdain, no longer directed any more barbed remarks at him. At the very least, they would no longer call him a useless pig to his face. As he lay bedridden from his injuries in the aftermath of that battle, his mother was finally able to shed tears for him and feel completely justified. In the past, whenever he was bullied by his peers, his father would never offer him any words of consolation when he returned home, if he had been beaten bloody and bruised. In fact, he would barely even spare his son a glance, seemingly looking down on him just as his bullies did. He had lost both of his arms on the battlefield, and whenever his son returned home in disgrace, he would glare at his wife out of the corner of his eye with a cold sneer on his face, silently reprimanding her for her excessively soft style of parenting. However, after that battle, Yenjua's father returned to the Sword Chi Great Wall for the first time in many years, then bent down so that his son could be placed onto his back before personally carrying Yenjua back home. At the time, Yenjua had been lying on his bed, while Aoyang had been leaning in the doorway, watching him with a smile. Even though he was weeping from the agony of his injuries, he felt a sense of immense pride at the sight of the thumbs up directed his way by Aoyang. Among his peers, Yenjua didn't possess the loftiest cultivation base or the fastest flying sword, nor was he the one with the most kills to his name, but he was definitely the most annoying one to deal with because he had the most life-saving tricks up his sleeve. After parting ways with her friends, Daizhong returned to a squalid alley, where she had purchased a small house with the immortal coins that she had earned over the years. It was Daizhang's biggest wish in life to have a place that she could call her own, and after fulfilling that wish, she was fully content with her life. She had thought that this wish of hers would never become reality. That was until she met that unkempt man by the name of Aoyang. As a child, her favorite activity was to run around all over the city, buying different types of wine for him. According to Aoyang, one had to drink different types of wine depending on one's mood. Some wines could drown sorrows and turn sadness to joy, while others could enhance already joyful emotions to further elevate one's good mood. The best wines were the ones that allowed one to drink without thinking about anything else, focusing solely on the wine itself. At the time, Daizhong was still very young, so she didn't really understand all of that, nor did she care to try to understand. All she cared about was whether she would be able to earn some scrap silver from her trips. Of course, there was also a chance that she could accumulate wine debts instead. After she became more familiar with Aoyang, the latter told her that she was all grown up, and having grown into such a beautiful young woman, she had to develop a sense of responsibility. Thus, some of his wine debts were entrusted to Daizhong. He promised her that there was no way he would run away from his debts, encouraging her to go to the majestic world and ask around to see if anyone had a bad word to say about him. At the time, Daizhong still had both her arms, and she was convinced by Aoyang's spirited promise. The name of Daizhong had actually been given to her by Aoyang. According to Aoyang, the scenery in the majestic world was much, much better than the scenery in this godforsaken place. He particularly enjoyed seeing those lush, layered mountains that presented a stunning sight to behold. Every single one of those mountains was an elegant woman, and they were so tall that it was difficult for men not to see them, even if they wanted to avoid it. 1. Daizhong opened the gate, then sat down in the courtyard. Perhaps she was inspired after seeing Ningyao's reunion with her beloved, but in that moment, she thought of the Confucian scholar who took righteous aura with him. Back then, he had been a noble scholar who had come to the Sword Chi Great Wall to experience the world, and once he went back, he was a virtuous scholar. She didn't know if she would get to see him again before she lost her life on the battlefield. There were some things that she wanted to tell him straight from her heart, some feelings that she wanted to inform him of, regardless of whether that would lead to anything. Dong and Chen were two of the most powerful surnames on the Sword Chi Great Wall. The Yen clan's power and prestige came from its immense wealth, while the foundation of the Dong and Chen clans was built up by generation after generation of sword immortals. Dong Huafu's residence was very close to Chen Sanchio's. The two manors were on the same street. For many young girls, their round and childish faces would eventually grow thinner and more angular as they grew up over time. However, Dong Huafu's older sister was an exception. Even after all these years, her face remained as round as ever, but even so, she still had many secret admirers thanks to her exceptional swordsmanship and tremendous combat prowess. In battle, Dong Butte enjoyed deploying a reckless style where she put her life on the line in order to secure a decisive outcome as quickly as possible, and she was someone who had earned the respect of even a proud prodigy like Ning Yao. Dong Huafu had no interest in romantic affairs, nor did he understand the subject in the slightest, but he was aware that his good friend Chen Sanxiu had always been in love with his older sister. The two of them were very close in age, and apparently they had grown up as close childhood friends. Unfortunately, Chen Sanxiu's feelings weren't reciprocated by Dong Bud. In private, Dong Bud had told her brother that she didn't like Chen Sanxiu because he was too handsome. Even for someone as clueless and oblivious as Dong Huafu, he felt like this was not a legitimate reason. Dong Huafu was worried that if his sister were to marry someone else someday, then Chen Sanxiu would become a depressed alcoholic. As a child, Chen Sanxiu had always liked to follow Aoyang around, trying to get free wine out of the latter. He hadn't learned much swordsmanship from Aoyang, but he had picked up plenty of bad habits. Strangely enough, Chen Sanxiu had always been extremely devoted to Dong Bud, only to be met with constant rejection, but he was very popular with many women who were clearly superior to Dong Bud in the looks department. In particular, over the past few years, the wine saleswoman would practically begin salivating whenever she saw Chen Sanxiu, and she allowed him to purchase as much wine on credit as he pleased. Standing at the entrance of the Dong Manor was Dong Bud, alongside an excited woman, none other than the mother of the two siblings. With a sense of exasperation, Dong Huafu realized that the two women had to have somehow received wind of Chen Pingan's arrival, and were eager to pry some information out of him. He couldn't help but wonder if all of the women under the heavens were so infatuated with gossip. Dong Huafu turned to take a glance at Chen Sanxiu, then turned back to look at his sister, who was eagerly beckoning to him, and he was struck by a sense of sorrow and sympathy. Chen Sanxiu really wasn't a bad guy, so why didn't his sister like him? Desperate to avoid being forcibly dragged onto the gossip train, Dong Huafu immediately said, "I'm not going to say anything about what happened between Big Sister Ning and Chen Pingan. If you want to know, then go to the Ning Manor and ask for yourselves." Dong Huafu had become wiser since the last time. Following Chen Pingan's departure from his previous visit to the Sword Qi Great Wall, Dong Huafu had once been drinking with Ning Yao. During a period of respite between the two battles, in a rare state of inebriation, Ning Yao had let slip a bold declaration, which was that she could beat up 100 Chen Pingans with just a single hand. Amused by this, Dong Huafu had returned home and relayed what he had heard to Dong Bud on a whim. The story was instantly relayed to their mother, and anything that those two knew would soon be known by all of the women on the entire Sword Qi Great Wall. Ning Yao had been furious with him in the aftermath, and he wasn't even permitted to enter the Ning Manor during his next visit. Fatty Yan and the others all strutted into the manor with looks of schadenfreude on their faces, and had Dong Huafu not been so earnest in his endeavor to make amends, telling Ning Yao that he was willing to stand still and allow her to take a few slashes at him with her sword as an apology, he would have most likely still been unwelcome in the Ning Manor even to this day. Ning Yao rarely became truly angry, but when she did, there would be hell to pay for it. With that in mind, Dong Huafu couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for Chen Pingan. It seemed that even when Ning Yao became truly angry, he was always able to quickly defuse her. Dong Bud refused to take no for an answer, looking borderline frantic as she urged, "Tell us what happened." In order to save himself, Dong Huafu pulled out his trump card asking, "Don't you like Aoyang? Why are you asking about Chen Pingan? Have you had a change of heart? Even if you have, it's not like you'll be able to take him away from Big Sister Ning." Their mother prodded Dong Bud in the forehead as she smiled and encouraged, "You need to try harder, girl. You have to make Aoyang into my son-in-law." The thought of the perpetually unserious Aoyang having to formally offer up wine to her as his mother-in-law someday was enough to have the woman giggling like a little girl, and she pressed her hands to her face as she squealed, "I'm a little embarrassed thinking about it now." "Just you wait, mother. Such a day will come," Dong Bud promised with a confident smile. All the while, Dong Huafu was rolling his eyes into oblivion. It was common knowledge on the entire Sword Qi Great Wall that their mother had once been in love with Aoyang, and even to this day, there were some aunties who would intentionally bring up this matter in front of Dong Huafu's father whenever they came to visit. Fortunately, his father was able to retaliate in kind because plenty of those aunties themselves or other women in their clans had also once harbored romantic feelings for Aoyang. Furthermore, Dong Huafu's father was the only swordsman who had been able to challenge Aoyang thrice in succession. Of course, on all three occasions, he ended up having to be carried back home on a stretcher. Apparently, this was how he had managed to win the heart of Dong Huafu's mother. In the wake of his success story, countless single men swarmed to challenge Aoyang in the hopes of finding the same success. To his credit, Aoyang was happy to entertain them, but he requested that a payment be made with each challenge. If one of them were to injure him, then the payment would serve to cover Aoyang's medical costs. This ploy earned Aoyang a ton of money in a single day, allowing him to repay almost all of his wine debts overnight. After that, Aoyang made his way onto the Sword Chi Great Wall, then cupped his fist in a salute as he loudly declared to everyone that he was admitting defeat, that all of his challengers were super strong, and that he wished them all well in their romantic pursuits. He told everyone that there was no need to thank him for playing his role as matchmaker, but if they insisted on displaying gratitude, then they could invite him to drink at their future wedding. This declaration was met with a brief stunned silence, following which someone let loose a loud yell, and in the blink of an eye countless enraged swordsmen emerged from all over the city, all with the objective of hunting down the shameless bastard to administer a beating. However, Aoyang didn't give them the opportunity, fleeing into the heart of the savage world to evade them. All of the men who had been united in their fury were left staring blankly at each other atop the Sword Chi Great Wall, and upon their return to the city, they were met by a bunch of incensed women, who blamed them for forcing Aoyang to venture deep into enemy territory and threatened to make them pay should any harm befall their beloved Aoyang. That wasn't even the most infuriating part of all of this. Instead, it was something that they only found out after the event. As it turned out, the enraged yell that had kick-started all of this had been a staged stunt. The person in question had yelled, "Please don't go, Aoyang. Even all of the men on the Sword Chi Great Wall combined can't compare with you." These provocative words had come from a clueless little girl. Apparently, Aoyang had instructed her to say this on the night, and she did as she was told, even though she had no idea what it meant. The furious men couldn't take their anger out on a little girl who didn't know any better, so they could only swallow the bitter pill for now and eagerly await Aoyang's return to the Sword Chi Great Wall. For someone as shameless as Aoyang, there was no need to observe any code of honor by challenging him to one-on-one battles. Instead, everyone was going to gang up on him at once and hack him to pieces. Eventually, Aoyang returned, but it was with several Ascension-tier great demons hot on his trail, forcing all of the sword immortals of the Sword Chi Great Wall to be deployed in full force to ward off the enemy. Aoyang's presence had brought a great deal of life and excitement to the otherwise dull and lifeless Sword Chi Great Wall. Unfortunately, he had left not just the Sword Chi Great Wall, but the entire majestic world altogether. Since then, everyone had heard that he had once exchanged blows with the Taoist second disciple of the heavenly world. As for all of the women who harbored romantic feelings for Aoyang, none of them were particularly saddened by his departure because they knew from the very beginning that Aoyang wasn't going to reciprocate any of their feelings. Furthermore, it wasn't long after Aoyang first arrived on the Sword Chi Great Wall that everyone realized that he would eventually leave. Hence, liking Aoyang almost became a fun pastime for many of the women on the Sword Chi Great Wall. Some of the more bold and straightforward women would even go out of their way to tease him when they caught him drinking at a street-side stall, making flirtatious innuendos or even openly seducing him without making any effort to mask their intentions. Whenever this happened, Aoyang would feign a shy and embarrassed demeanor, telling his female admirers that he was honored that they felt that way about him before urging them not to say such things to him in the future, as it only made him embarrassed and uneasy. Only after the gate of the Dong Manor had swung shut did Chan Sancho finally depart. He wasn't all that saddened by the fact that the girl he liked didn't reciprocate his feelings. Prior to his departure from the Sword Chi Great Wall, Aoyang had invited Chan Sancho for a drink, and he had said some things that strongly resonated with Chan Sancho. If a girl doesn't like you, then it must be because you're still not good enough. Perhaps someday when you feel like you're good enough to be worthy of her, she may have already married someone else. In the blink of an eye, her children will be old enough to go playing out on the streets, and they'll call you Uncle Chan when they see you. Don't be saddened by this. You didn't like the wrong person. It simply wasn't meant to be. Make sure you don't continue to harass and cause trouble for her after she gets married. Instead, hide your feelings and put all of it into wine. Whenever you're drinking, pray for her to live a good life and be happy. Don't constantly fantasize that she would come to resent her current life and choose you after having a change of heart. That's not how a man should feel about a woman he truly loves. After recalling these heartfelt words from Aoyang, Chen Sancho decided to go to a wine shop instead of returning home, and before long, he was heavily inebriated as he loudly cursed Aoyang for telling him all of that. He would have much preferred not to have imparted these nuggets of wisdom. That way, he would have been able to continue liking Dong Bud in a shameless and selfish fashion, instead of being bogged down by all these thoughts of maturity and doing what was best for her. The people at the wine shop were already accustomed to this. It was just another drunken fit from the young master of the Chen clan. No one was concerned, as he was always able to stumble back home on his own eventually. Occasionally, he would begin knocking on a wall and yelling for the door to be opened, but none of the passers-by on the street found this a strange sight. Every once in a while he would have an episode like this, such as when his good friend Little Tsiu died in battle, or when his first guardian swordsman died to protect him, or when other seniors of the Chen clan met their demise on the battlefield south of the Sword Chi Great Wall, or on instances like this one when he was thinking of his beloved Dong Bud. Each time after he sobered up from one of his drunken fits, he would proclaim that he simply enjoyed wine, just like Aoyang. Some people were destined to be around wine their entire lives. That was simply what fate had in store for them. Whenever there was no battle taking place beyond the Sword Chi Great Wall, the bored young individuals in the city would frequently fight among themselves. Many challenges were issued every single day, some for one-on-one fights, others for group battles. However, it was strictly forbidden to harm the opponent's cultivation foundation. Outside of that, nothing was off-limits. Even Dong Huafu's mother, who was renowned for adoring her son, wouldn't say anything whenever he came back bruised and beaten. At the very most, she would only encourage him to stay home, and tell him that there was nothing fun about the outside world. She would tell him that their clan had plenty of money, and that she could send out servants to buy whatever he wanted so he could play on his own at home. This morning Yan Zhuo and the others congregated in front of the entrance of the Ning Manor. There was a dark look on Dong Huafu's face because several groups of bystanders had appeared on the street, seemingly waiting for a certain someone to come out of the Ning Manor. Chen Sancho was vigorously shaking his head from side to side. He had had too much to drink the day before, but thankfully, he had drunk some more wine this morning to help himself sober up. Otherwise he would have felt even worse. Dai Zhang was the only one absent. She had opened a small shop not far away from the alley where she lived, selling some general goods for minor profits. After becoming friends with Ning Yao and the others, she was just as devoted to them as they were to her. And they were all willing to lay down their lives to protect one another. But one thing Dai Zhang absolutely refused to do was accept money from any of her friends. Even if they were all rich, that was still their money, and she didn't need or want charity from anyone. Once upon a time, Yan Zhuo had felt very hurt by her refusal to accept his goodwill, arguing that she only had what she currently did because she had accepted financial aid from Aoyang in the past, so why was she unwilling to accept help from her close friends? He told her that he wanted to help her, not because he looked down on her. Instead, he simply wanted to see his friend live a better life. So he felt fully justified and saddened by Dai Zhang's stubbornness. At the time, Dai Zhang had bit down on her own lower lip and said nothing. After that, Yan Zhuo was pounced on by a furious Ning Yao, forcing him to run for his life. For a very long time in the aftermath of the incident, Yan Zhuo and Dai Zhang didn't speak to each other. Of course, Ning Yao didn't speak to Yan Zhuo either, and as a result, the atmosphere had been very tense and awkward whenever the group of friends met up. In the end, Yan Zhuo decided, for some reason, to go and watch Dai Zhang working at her shop in secret from around the corner. He watched her for a very long time that day, and only then did he come to understand why she refused to accept his help. Ultimately, he was too prideful to go and apologize to her. But the next day, Dai Zhang apologized to him, to his complete and utter astonishment. After that, he received a beating from Chen Sancho and Dong Huafu as well, but from that day forth, he and Dai Zhang were back on good terms again. The three of them entered the Ning Manor, and they just so happened to run into Ning Yao and Chen Pingan, who were taking a stroll together. "You see? I told you." Yan Zhuo gloated in a quiet voice. "There's no way they'd be holding hands in front of us." All right, I'll treat you to wine next time," Chen Sancho conceded in a resigned manner. You really want to drink wine, I hear? Ning Yao asked as she raised an eyebrow. Dong Huafu immediately threw his two friends to the wolves, pointing at them as he explained, I'm not actually interested at all, but they insist on treating me, so I have no choice. You truly are a great friend, Yanjua scoffed. Indeed, Chen Sancho agreed. Dong Huafu was just about to reveal the contents of their bet to Ning Yao when Yanjua threw a hand over his mouth, following which Chen Sancho slung an arm around his neck and dragged him backward as he smiled and said, We won't interrupt your stroll any longer. If you need anything, feel free to tell us. What's their problem? Ning Yao mused with a perplexed expression as she watched the trio hurriedly depart. Chen Sancho and Yanjua must have been betting on where I slept last night, Chen Pingan said with a chuckle. Do they have a death wish? Ning Yao asked in a menacing voice, but she was glowering directly at Chen Pingan as she spoke. Chen Pingan wiped at the sweat that had suddenly begun to bead up on his forehead as he replied, Perhaps. Ning Yao continued strolling along as she casually asked, Don't you want to go out and take a look? You were able to take so many punches from Granny Bai, so I'm sure you won't lose too badly even if you get challenged. Being liked by you is not something I should use to show off, Chen Pingan replied with a serious expression. Ning Yao gave a cold harumph as she turned to depart, and Chen Pingan followed along. One of the perks of having a large manor was that it provided more than enough space for a walk, and even a second trip through the premises didn't feel repetitive. Nearby, the old woman was sweeping the yard, and she took a glance at Nailin Yeshing, who was very clearly eavesdropping on the young couple. A combination of exasperation and amusement appeared on her face as she scoffed. Do you not have any shame? There's no way he would say or do anything out of line in broad daylight, the old man replied. Having said that, it seems like he really does know what a woman likes to hear. What did he say to young Mistress Ning? The old woman asked, unable to suppress her curiosity. The old man was just about to build some suspense, but it was clear that doing so would only earn him a beating, so he immediately came clean and relayed what Chen Pingan had just said. A pleased smile appeared on the old woman's face and she said, This has nothing to do with saying what women want to hear. Young Master Chen is simply a good man with pure intentions and good morals. The old man shook his head in a resigned manner, and he was just about to return to his eavesdropping when he was struck by a broom to the side, so he could only sheepishly hobble away in silence. Meanwhile, Chen Pingan had just heard about the general goods shop being run by Dai Zhang, and his eyes immediately lit up as he said, That's great. I'll find a chance to speak to Dai Zhang, and we could work together as business partners. I don't think that's a good idea, Ning Yao discouraged with a shake of her head. Dai Zhang is a very sensitive girl, and this is the kind of thing that she hates the most. She had almost had a permanent falling out with Fatty Yen in the past over something like this. I can already tell what the problem with Yanjua's approach was, even if you don't go into detail, Chen Pingan said with a laugh. Don't worry, I'm not the same. I came up from Clay Vase Alley, and I've been going around everywhere as a traveling salesman for many years. I can promise you that Dai Zhang will be able to earn more profits and feel great about working with me. And I'll also be able to earn some money through her shop. Oh, it sounds like you understand women really well, Ning Yao remarked with a side-eyed glance. You must have learned a lot through your travels. Don't misunderstand, I don't mean anything by that. I'm just commenting on what I'm observing. Chen Pingan immediately began to sweat again, but thankfully, Ning Yao let him off the hook as she chuckled. I'm just kidding around. I'll be very happy if you can help out with Dai Zhang's business without making her feel bad. Dai Zhang loves money more than just about anything else, and right now her biggest wish is to be able to earn herself a bigger house through her efforts. Chen Pingan had only just heaved a sigh of relief when Ning Yao clasped her hands behind her back and cast her gaze forward as she mused. Why are you worried if you haven't done anything wrong? Chen Pingan stared at her side profile for a moment, then suddenly stopped in his tracks and pounced on her like a starving wolf. Ning Yao hurriedly sprang away as her complexion quickly reddened with embarrassment. Chen Pingan, keep your hands to yourself. Don't be so loud, Chen Pingan hurriedly urged in a quiet voice. Somehow, Ning Yao seemed even more afraid of being caught than Chen Pingan, and she hurriedly pursed her lips. By the time she realized that she had just been swindled, Chen Pingan was already making a swift retreat. Initially, her first thought was to pursue him, but all of a sudden, she found herself momentarily entranced. As she gazed upon the warm and affectionate smile on Chen Pingan's face, it occurred to her that he was quite a handsome guy, something that she had failed to notice in the past. Ning Yao was cultivating on the dragon-slaying cliff, while Chen Pingan chose to remain in his room to cultivate, as opposed to going to the pergola. Ning Yao was rather puzzled by this decision. There was a much greater abundance of spiritual energy on the dragon-slaying cliff, making it inarguably the best place for cultivation in the entire Ning Manor. Even though Chen Pingan stood to benefit a little less, seeing as he wasn't a swordsman, it was still clearly a better choice than anywhere else. Chen Pingan offered no explanation as he looked back at Ning Yao with a resigned expression. In response, Ning Yao scoffed that it was no wonder that he was progressing so slowly in his cultivation, and Chen Pingan could only shake his head with a wry smile. In immortal powers like the Spring Dew Garden, Cloudtop City, and Misty Mountain, becoming a 4th-tier chi refiner was not considered to be slow progress at all. Unfortunately, on the Sword Chi Great Wall, Chen Pingan's rate of progression may as well have been as slow as a meandering tortoise. Even his mastery of the 18 stops technique had come far slower than it did for everyone else. He and Ning Yao had once discussed the 18 stops technique taught to them by Aoyang, and on that occasion he asked her how long it had taken Yan Zhua and the others to master the chi refinement and sword refinement methods of the 18 stops technique. He was very much surprised by the answer, and out of curiosity, he asked Ning Yao how long it had taken her. In response, she merely gave him a smile, seeing no need to answer his question and further dent his confidence. Hence, back then, Chen Pingan felt like the old great sword immortal had only lied to him to make him feel better when making the claim that he had the potential to become an earth immortal. Around 4 hours later, Chen Pingan withdrew his consciousness from his internal small world. His consciousness had been immersed in his wood residence up to this point, but a slow exhalation marked the conclusion of this stint of cultivation. According to his normal routine, he would have begun practicing his walking meditation, but on this occasion, he left the courtyard and traveled to a walkway some distance away from the dragon-slaying cliff, where he observed the pergola from afar. In doing so, he spotted an intriguing phenomenon. The sword chi in that direction was manifesting itself in the form of iridescent sprites, slowly swirling around like a flock of birds. Up above, there was even something akin to a water vein. It seemed that the world at large and Ning Yao's internal small world had been connected by a bridge of immortality, thereby forging a connection between her and heaven and earth. Chen Pingan tucked his hands up their opposite sleeves as he leaned against a nearby pillar with a wide grin on his face, clearly very pleased for Ning Yao. All of a sudden, Nalan Yeshing silently appeared beside Chen Pingan, and there was a look of surprise on the former's face as he asked, "Are you able to see the sword chi manifesting itself around young Mistress Ning?" Chen Pingan hurriedly stood up straight again as he replied, "I can only see some indistinct signs, but it's not very clear." "You already have a very keen eye on par with the Earth Immortal Swordsman here," Nalan Yeshing praised with a smile and a nod of approval. "When will Ning Yao be able to overcome her golden core tier bottleneck?" Chen Pingan asked. "Even at the very earliest, it'll probably have to be at the conclusion of the next battle," Nalan Yeshing replied. "Can I ask how many guardian swordsmen accompany Ning Yao and her friends when they go into battle, and what their cultivation bases are?" Chen Pingan asked. "During the 2 battles that took place in your absence, every single one of the 30 or so top young prodigies of our Sword Chi Great Wall is accompanied by guardian swordsmen on the battlefield, and young Mistress Ning is naturally no exception," Nalan Yeshing replied with a smile. "Those children are the most precious seeds of our Sword Chi Great Wall, and we go to great lengths to keep them safe. The swordsmen of the northern complete reed continent have been a big help in this regard. Otherwise, there aren't enough native swordsmen on the Sword Chi Great Wall to go around. I suppose this is the problem with having too many prodigies in one generation. All guardian swordsmen are extremely powerful and decisive in battle, and their objective is to at least each take down a demon tribe assassin at the cost of their own lives. Aside from them, I am also always around to protect young Mistress Ning in secret, and Yan Zhua and Chan Sanxiu each have a guardian sword immortal from their respective clans as well." After the first of the 2 battles, many of these young prodigies had made breakthroughs, and according to the rules of the Sword Chi Great Wall, anyone who reached the Golden Core tier would no longer be assigned guardian swordsman, regardless of their age or status. Young Mistress Ning and her group of friends are all considered to be extremely bright talents, so even though they are no longer accompanied by ordinary guardian swordsmen, they are still looked after by a sword immortal who serves as both their Dao mentor and Dao guardian. However, the sword immortal doesn't have to go out of their way to protect them, and in most cases, young Mistress Ning and the others are responsible for their own safety. Even if, heavens forbid, young Mistress Ning and her friends all perish on the battlefield, while that sword immortal survives, they won't be held reprehensible at all by the Sword Qi Great Wall. You may think that this is a rather harsh arrangement, but you have to realize that once young Mistress Ning and her friends grow into their full potential, they will also become guardian swordsmen for the generation below them. This has always been the tradition on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Of course, things like wealth and status aren't completely useless, even in a place like the Sword Qi Great Wall. During times of peace, those from more prominent clans will inevitably receive more cultivation resources than their less affluent counterparts. However, on the battlefield, none of that matters in the slightest, and the higher one's cultivation base, the more peril they'll find themselves in. There have been cowards in the history of our Sword Qi Great Wall, ones who possessed good aptitude and came from affluent backgrounds, but lacked courage and resolve. Those people would intentionally hold themselves back in their cultivation, and they go their entire lives barely setting foot onto the battlefield at all. However, the good thing about the Sword Qi Great Wall is that the rise of each prominent clan is always accompanied by a spectacular story related to slaying great demons. Hence, even for those who come from humble and impoverished backgrounds, as long as they possess sufficient aptitude, they know that they possess the potential to change their own fate. As long as they can slay enough great demons and survive long enough, they would be able to write their own rags to riches story, single-handedly altering the fate of both themselves and their entire clan. One of Master Ning's biggest wishes was to return the Ning clan to its former glory, restoring its status as one of the most powerful and respected surnames on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Of course, his other biggest wish was for young Mistress Ning to find a good husband. Many people in the majestic world don't think that way, Chen Pingan said. I was one of those people back when I was a child. Whenever I see other kids my age who don't have to worry about having food in their bellies and clothes on their backs, I would tell myself that they're just lucky because they still have their parents, and their clans are wealthy. I would convince myself that the pastries on Dragon Riding Alley weren't anywhere near as appetizing as they looked, and that I would only get sick if I ate too many of them. Whenever I thought this, I would salivate a little less, and my stomach would growl a little more quietly. If that didn't work, then I would run back to my house to look at the dried fish that I caught from the stream and hung up on the wall. Just by looking at them, I would feel a little less hungry. An embarrassed look appeared on Chen Pingan's face as he apologized. I'm sorry, Grandpa Nalan. Hearing that story was probably a bit of a killjoy. It's fine, Nalan Yeshing replied with a smile. On the Sword Qi Great Wall, I'm constantly hearing people talk about the big picture and things of great importance, so it's a breath of fresh air to hear such a down-to-earth story. The last time I got to hear stories like this was when young Mistress Ning had only just returned from the majestic world. Unfortunately, young Mistress Ning isn't very talkative, so I didn't get to hear many stories from her. However, the few that she told me already painted a very alluring picture of the majestic world, particularly for people like me, who have never ever gone to Stalactite Mountain. Young Master Chen, even though you're still not a swordsman, you should still strongly consider honing that sword on your back and the other flying swords in your possession, even if they're not bonded items of yours. Don't waste that dragon-slaying cliff. The Ning clan has fought so hard to protect it so that it can be put to good use, not sit around and gather dust. If you don't understand even something so simple, then that's truly rather disappointing. Master Ning often spoke about how he wished a descendant of the Ning clan would be able to use up the entire dragon-slaying cliff. In that case, I'll go right ahead, Chen Pingan said. Please do, young Master Chen, Nalan Yeshing encouraged. It's not good to always be so formal and reserved. Be that as it may, would you not be at least a little bit annoyed if I had gone to sharpen my sword on the dragon-slaying cliff without your permission? Chen Pingan asked with a smile. You would inevitably think to yourself that I'm rather rude and uncultured. Nalan Yeshing faltered slightly upon hearing this, then burst into laughter as he conceded. I suppose you're right. Chen Pingan chuckled. Truth be told, I've been waiting for you to give me permission for quite some time, Grandpa Nalan. Nalan Yeshing feigned a furious expression as he smacked Chen Pingan in the shoulder and grumbled. You present yourself as a good and innocent young man, but deep down you're quite a tricky little rascal, aren't you? You should count yourself fortunate that you're at least earnest and sincere when it comes to young Mistress Ning. Otherwise, I'd have you kicked out in an instant. The Sword Qi Great Wall was a natural cultivation paradise for all qi refiners, but in order to enjoy the cultivation benefits this place provided, one first had to be able to withstand the pervasive and unforgiving sword intent here. If any qi refiner outside of swordsmen were even slightly lacking in aptitude, they would be unable to cultivate in peace on the Sword Qi Great Wall. As soon as they opened their acupoints, sword qi and spiritual energy would both come flooding in at once, and just the endeavor of expelling the unwanted sword qi from their acupoints would be a massive headache. Even if one were able to overcome this obstacle, they still wouldn't be able to cultivate here for long, and the reason for this no longer had anything to do with cultivation aptitude. Instead, the problem was that those on the Sword Qi Great Wall had always detested qi refiners of the majestic world. Only with the necessary connections would one be able to secure permission to cultivate on the Sword Qi Great Wall for extended periods of time, and even then, it would cost them dearly. Each tier had its own price, and this system had been put in place by the ancestors of the Yin clan. Throughout the course of history, the prices had been changed a total of 11 times, and every single time the price had been raised with no chance of any reductions. Earlier, Chen Pingan had learned a great deal about the history of the Yao clan and Ning Yao's childhood from Granny Bai, and on this occasion, he asked Nalin Yeshing many questions about the two most recently concluded battles south of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The two of them chatted for a while longer before parting ways. Prior to his departure, Chen Pingan raised one final question, asking Nalin Yeshing who the sword immortal that had served as the Dao Guardian for Ning Yao and the others in the previous battle had been. Coincidentally, it was a swordsman from the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, a man by the name of Wei Jin. Chen Pingan had a very deep impression of Wei Jin. During his journey with Li Baoping and the others to the Great Sui Nation, it was Wei Jin who had split open the heavens with his sword during Chen Pingan's encounter with the Ghost Bride. At the time, the sight of Wei Jin's incredible feat had swept up massive waves in Chen Pingan's mental state, waves that refused to subside even many years down the line. Even in the history of the Sword Qi Great Wall, swordmen who reached the unpolished jade tier before turning 60 were extremely rare. Nalin Yeshing had a positive impression of Wei Jin, and the same applied to just about everyone on the Sword Qi Great Wall. He had earned everyone's respect with his exceptional swordsmanship and his decision to come and risk his life on the Sword Qi Great Wall, when he could have had a far brighter future by remaining in the majestic world. Furthermore, he had mentioned that he had only been able to overcome his nascent tier bottleneck so quickly thanks to Aoyang's guidance. Otherwise, according to the old ancestors of the Wind Snow Temple, it would have taken him 60 years to slowly and painstakingly whittle away at his nascent tier bottleneck, and he would have only become a sword immortal at around 100 years of age. In truth, this wasn't an entirely fair assessment. Out of all of the paths that qi refiners could take, the path of the swordsman was the most expensive one, and also the one that had the most stringent requirements when it came to aptitude. If Wei Jin hadn't built up a sufficiently solid and strong foundation, even Aoyang wouldn't have been able to forcibly elevate him to the unpolished jade tier. Following Chen Pingan's departure, Bai Lianshuang appeared beside Nalin Yeshing and sneered at Nalin Yeshing. "You sure are in a talkative mood today. Oh great sword immortal Nalin. Are you worried that young Master Chen wouldn't hear about your past embarrassing stories, unless you told him yourself?" Nalin Yeshing chuckled. "You're just jealous. With you, he mostly spoke about general affairs of the martial world, but with me he discussed a wide range of topics, from trivial life stories to important matters that concern the fate of the entire Sword Qi Great Wall. It's clear as day who he feels more of a connection with." "Shameless bastard," the old woman scoffed. "Can we not resort to personal attacks?" Nalin Yeshing asked in an exasperated manner. "What do you mean by personal attacks?" "I'm just stating the objective truth," Bai Lianshuang countered. Nalin Yeshing could only heave a forlorn sigh before departing with his hands clasped behind his back. Ning Yao had always taken her cultivation very seriously, and over the next 2 days, she would only take a glance up at the pergola on the dragon-slaying cliff to see if Chen Pingan was there during brief breaks in her cultivation. Even if he wasn't there, she wouldn't leave the mountain to go and find him. Instead, at the very most, she would only take a short stroll before returning to her cultivation. Before long, Chen Pingan had gotten the hint, and he would appear at the pergola whenever Ning Yao took one of her short breaks. But once he began doing this, she started to ignore him, pretending not to have spotted him as she returned to her cultivation. On those occasions, Chen Pingan could only watch her for a while before departing. It wasn't that he didn't want to stay longer. Instead, he was eager to focus on his own cultivation. After reaching the 4th tier, the rate at which he was able to refine the 36 bricks from the Taoist temple had sped up by 30%, and to his surprise and elation, this rate was even further enhanced on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Thus, he was eager to capitalize, often becoming completely immersed in his own cultivation in the small residence where he was staying as he simultaneously focused on qi refinement and item refinement at once. However, after leaving the pergola this time, Chen Pingan didn't immediately return to his residence. Instead, he sought out Bai Lianshuang and invited her and Nailin Yeshing to his residence, telling her that he had something to discuss with them. Bai Lianshuang happily agreed, following Chen Pingan back to his residence. Instead of going out of her way to fetch Nailin Yeshing, she merely stomped a foot onto the ground and yelled for him to come out, at which point he immediately appeared nearby like an apparition. Chen Pingan invited the 2 seniors into the room, then poured a cup of tea for them each. There were already 3 items placed on the table, namely Sword Immortal, Golden Sweet Wine, and the jade tablet that he had purchased from the Ganoderma Inn on Stalactite Mountain. After the 3 of them sat down at the table, Chen Pingan's face became heavily flushed, and he opened his mouth several times to speak, but didn't seem to know how to begin. In the end, it was Nailin Yeshing who broke the silence, asking, "Are these meant to be marriage gifts, young Master Chen?" The old woman was delighted, raising a hand to her face as she chuckled in amusement. "You can't offer up your marriage gifts yourself, young Master Chen." Chen Pingan hurriedly waved his hands as he replied, "Rest assured, I'll definitely follow the rules and traditions and find an official matchmaker. The problem is that I don't know anything about the marriage customs and traditions on the Sword Qi Great Wall, and there's no one else here that I can ask, so I can only trouble the 2 of you to come and give me some advice. I'm worried that these gifts are going to be inadequate, or that it's inappropriate to present them so directly. I want to do things the right way so that I don't bring shame to the Ning clan's name." Bai Lianshuang and Nailin Yeshing exchanged a smile, and neither of them said anything. Chen Pingan took a deep breath, then continued, "I'll do everything in my power to follow the relevant customs and traditions of the Sword Qi Great Wall, but I'm going to personally propose to Ning Yao. The 2 of you or the Yao clan can raise objections, and I'll listen to them, but no matter what happens, I want to personally propose to Ning Yao. That's non-negotiable for me. I don't care who comes to try and dissuade me or how compelling their reasons are. I'm not going to change my mind." Bai Lianshuang and Nailin Yeshing exchanged a glance with each other, and both of them continued to remain silent. Chen Pingan rose to his feet, then extended a deep bow as he cupped his fist in a salute and said in a solemn voice, "Both of my parents have already passed away, and the 2 seniors that I respect and admire the most on the path of cultivation have also passed on. I have a teacher, but he's not in the majestic world right now, and I have no way of finding him. Otherwise, I would have definitely called upon one of them to come with me to the Sword Qi Great Wall, and visit the Ning clan and the Yao clan on my behalf." Nailin Yeshing was just about to speak, only to sheepishly close his mouth as Bai Lianshuang shot him a cold glare. "Take a seat, young Master Chen," she said in a warm and gentle voice. Chen Pingan sat back down, his back ramrod straight. Even though he was doing his best to appear calm and composed, there was a palpable sense of unease about him. "For starters, can you tell us about the origins of these 2 items?" the old woman asked as she pointed at Sword Immortal and Golden Sweet Wine. Chen Pingan hurriedly nodded in response, then spoke briefly about the 2 items in question. Nailin Yeshing remained silent this entire time, merely sipping his tea. Even though he had seen more than his fair share of powerful treasures, he still couldn't help but be astonished by Chen Pingan's account. According to him, Sword Immortal had somehow been elevated by half a tier under rather inexplicable circumstances, and had been personally appraised by spiritual master Fire Dragon of the Northern Complete Reed continent, who deemed it to be a celestial weapon. As for Golden Sweet Wine, it had initially only been a rather ordinary Dao robe, but it had since also been elevated into a celestial tool from devouring gold essence copper coins, a form of currency completely unheard of on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Nailin Yeshing was at a slight loss for words. On the Sword Qi Great Wall, Even for marriages between individuals from prominent clans like the Chan, Dong, and Qi clans, a marriage gift of just a single pseudo-celestial treasure or celestial treasure would already be considered quite a hefty offering. Furthermore, there were only so many pseudo-celestial treasures and celestial treasures on the entire Sword Qi Great Wall, and that led to a rather awkward phenomenon, where these precious treasures were often gifted back and forth between the prominent clans for important marriages. Every 100 years or several centuries, one such treasure would re-emerge to be gifted again, and many of them had already passed through the hands of over a dozen clans. Everyone on the Sword Qi Great Wall was already accustomed to this phenomenon, and back when Aoyang was around, one of his favorite pastimes was to take bets on which pseudo-celestial treasures or celestial treasures would come up during important marriages between the prominent clans. Nailan Yeshing was finally unable to remain silent any longer as he said, "As a pure martial artist, golden sweet wine is something that would only be detrimental to you under most circumstances, so I can understand why you decided to offer it up as a marriage gift. But why are you also offering up a celestial sword when you promised young Mistress Ning that you would become a sword immortal? Are you thinking that what's hers will be yours anyway after you two get married, so the sword will simply end up back in your possession? If that's the case, then I have some bad news for you. The Ning clan may be willing to accept such an arrangement, but the same cannot be guaranteed for the Yao clan. If you hand over this sword now, the next time you see it, it may be in the possession of one of the Yao clan's young prodigies." "Shut your mouth, you old dog," Bai Lianshuang snapped. "No wonder you're normally so quiet when you spout nonsense like this whenever you open your mouth." However, Nailan Yeshing didn't back down on this occasion, and a cold sneer appeared on his face as he said, "This is a very important matter, and I have the right to speak. Back when Master Ning was just a child, I was already protecting him and the dragon-slaying cliff, and after Master Ning's passing, I've pledged myself to defending young Mistress Ning and the dragon-slaying cliff. You can call me shameless for saying this, but I count myself as half a senior of young Mistress Ning's, so I'm perfectly qualified to speak on this matter. If you want to stop me from talking with your fists, then I'll just have to dodge your punches as I speak." The old woman was furious, and her hands had already balled up into tight fists. Chen Pingan hurriedly mediated. "Let Grandpa Nailan speak, Granny Bai. Even if he makes some scathing remarks, as long as his advice is constructive, it'll be of benefit to me." The old woman turned to Nailan Yeshing, then threatened coldly, "Tread very carefully, Nailan Yeshing. For each word that you utter from here, you're going to have to take a punch from me. Don't say I didn't warn you." Nailan Yeshing took a sip of his tea. "Giving the best things that I have to offer to the person I love the most is something that makes all the sense in the world to me," Chen Pingan said. "For example, I had to pay a hefty price to elevate this golden sweet wine robe into a celestial robe, but I paid the price without any hesitation, and I don't regret it in the slightest. I will feel much more at ease if Ning Yao can wear it into future battles. That's my only consideration. As for Sword Immortal, it's been with me for many years, so I would be lying if I said that I wasn't attached to it, and it would be disingenuous for me to say that I don't know the value of a celestial sword, or that it doesn't matter to me. However, the value of these two things is completely incomparable to how important Ning Yao is to me. My decision to offer up Sword Immortal as a marriage gift wasn't made on the spur of the moment without any practical considerations. If it were better off in my hands and I could wield it to protect Ning Yao in the next battle, then I would keep it. I wouldn't offer up something so precious just to prove that someone who came from as impoverished a background as I did won't lose to the prominent clans when it comes to the value of the marriage gifts that I can offer. That would be a vain and foolish endeavor. I grew up as a child all on my own, and after that I journeyed for many years alone. I know when it's appropriate to dish out large sums of wealth, just as I know when I have to be miserly and frugal. I know when I can allow my emotions to influence my decisions, and when I have to be careful and objective. I've considered everything extensively, and my conclusion is that as long as what I intend to do can benefit both Ning Yao and me without compromising the stability of our future together, then I should go ahead and do it. It's not important what others say and think. These are not decisions made out of ignorance and naivete. Instead, I can confidently say that I've made these decisions after considering everything that needs to be pondered, so at the very least, I can justify them to myself. Even if I am made to pay for them in the future, I will have no regrets. If I had said these things 10 years ago, then they would have been nothing more than the ignorant ramblings of a conceited fool. Only a naive young boy who hasn't experienced the hardships of life will innocently believe that throwing all caution to the wind and blindly devoting himself to someone is true love. Over these past 10 years, I've worked diligently in both mental and physical cultivation, while traveling across 3 continents. Even though I have no seniors to educate me and teach me the principles of life, I have grown up and learned those principles on my own. I've proven to myself that I am capable of looking after myself, so I can begin to try and look after the woman that I love. Ever since I was a child, I've always been prone to overthinking. I would often hide somewhere on my own to weigh up certain choices and observe other people. However, from the moment I first met Ning Yao, I never did any overthinking, and I should thank the heavens that I didn't, because if I had paused even for just a moment to consider the circumstances, I would have been completely discouraged. Back then I had nothing and was struggling just to survive. What gives me the right to harbor romantic feelings for someone so far above me in every regard? How did I have the courage to come to Stalactite Mountain to find her under the guise of gifting her a sword? How was I able to come to the Ning Manor on this occasion and face her without feeling any sense of inferiority? I've heard enough, Bai Lianshuang interrupted with a pleased nod. Clearly, there's no need for a useless old woman like me to speak any further on this matter. She then turned her gaze to Nailan Yeshing, who was fully content to remain silent, but it was clear from the look on Bai Lianshuang's face that she wanted him to say something. Thus, after some contemplation, he warned, "You've said all the right things, but Bai Lianshuang and I will be watching closely to make sure that your actions align with your words. We can't afford any harm to befall young Mistress Ning. I welcome your supervision on important matters, but I implore that you give us some space when we're just doing normal, trivial things like taking a stroll together in the manor," Chen Pingan said with a wry smile. "The problem is that this crippled old dog has nothing better to do than spy on you and young Mistress Ning all day." Bai Lianshuang scoffed as she pointed at Nailan Yeshing. Nailan Yeshing hurriedly cleared his throat, then picked up his already empty teacup before pretending to take a sip, following which he stood up and said, "I won't interrupt your cultivation any longer then, young Master Chan. May I ask who you have in mind as your official matchmaker, young Master Chan?" the old woman suddenly asked. "That would be the old great sword immortal," Chen Pingan replied. "Having said that, I'm not very confident in my choice, and I don't know if he'll be willing." Nailan Yeshing was stunned by this answer. Chen Pingan had chosen just about the most ambitious option possible. From the very first day that the Sword Qi Great Wall was erected, the old Great Sword Immortal had constantly remained atop the city walls, not leaving even once for any occasion, even the marriages of his own Chan clan's top prodigies or the funerals held for the Chan clan's fallen sword immortals. Not a single exception had been made over the past tens of thousands of years, much to the disappointment and exasperation of even his own descendants. "If you can pull this off, then it would truly be an almighty honor," Bai Lianshuang said with a chuckle. "All I can do is shamelessly beg the old great sword immortal, but even then I have zero confidence that it'll actually work," Chen Pingan said with a wry smile. "I can only implore the two of you not to have any high hopes. If I'm unable to convince the old great sword immortal, then please forget I ever said anything about this at all." Nailan Yeshing chuckled. "The fact that you have such lofty aspirations at all already sets you apart from everyone else your age. So the old dog can give compliments after all," Bai Lianshuang said with a sneer. Nailan Yeshing grinned. "Of course. I'm a very kind and benevolent senior. Are you hearing this nonsense, young Master Chan?" Bai Lianshuang scoffed. "There's no need for you to show any respect to a shameless old fart like him. Now that he's a useless old cripple, the only thing that he's still half decent at is concealment. You could do him a favor by giving him the honor of teaching you what little skills he has left. Just keep yapping away, Bai Lianshuang." Nailan Yeshing scoffed in exasperation. "No matter how inept you make me sound, I'm still an unpolished jade tier sword immortal." The two seniors stood up to depart, and Chen Pingan accompanied them to the entrance of the small residence. Following their departure, Chen Pingan didn't return to the residence. Instead, he remained at the entrance and turned in a certain direction. After waiting for some time, someone finally appeared in that direction, and Chen Pingan approached them with a smile as he remarked, "What a coincidence that you just happened to stroll your way here as soon as I came out." "Indeed," Ning Yao replied with a nod, feigning ignorance of his insinuations. Now that you're here, why don't you help me out and see if there are any holes poked into the window paper of my room by thieves? Chen Pingan jibed. What are you talking about? Ning Yao asked with an innocent expression. How could there possibly be any thieves in the Ning Manor? You must be seeing things. Having said that, you have to pay if anything gets stolen. I've never met a thief before that only steals my heart and nothing else. Chen Pingan jibed with an affectionate smile. Chen Pingan, I'm going to have to beat some sense into you if you keep this up. Ning Yao snapped with a combination of embarrassment and indignation on her face. You are my whole world, Chen Pingan said in a quiet voice as he gently wound his arms around her. Ning Yao was just about to struggle free from his embrace, only for him to release her and take a step back before she had a chance to do so, leaving her even more frustrated. Your friends are here again, Chen Pingan explained in a quiet voice. This time they're intentionally sneaking around so you wouldn't notice them. Ning Yao took a moment to compose herself, and she immediately detected their presence. Come out, she yelled. Fatty Yen appeared by the Feng Shui rock, squatting in a completely still manner with a talisman in his hands. Fanning out behind him like the petals of a flower were the heads of Dong Huafu, Daizhong and Chan Sanqiu. Ning Yao had a stern look on her face, while Chen Pingan remained relaxed and composed, and the group made their way to the dragon-slaying cliff, but chose not to go and sit in the pergola. Dong Huafu and Daizhong had arranged a sparring match here. Yanjua told Chen Pingan that bloodshed was a common sight during their sparring matches, and he urged Chen Pingan not to be afraid. Chen Pingan smiled and nodded in response, telling Yanjua that he would pretend not to be afraid even if he was, much to Yanjua's amusement. Ning Yao glowered at Chen Pingan in disapproval as he swindled Yanjua, but as soon as he turned to meet her gaze, she immediately looked away. Chen Sanqiu had no interest in watching Dong Huafu and Daizhang's sparring match. Instead, he had snuck his way onto the dragon-slaying cliff, where he began discreetly sharpening scripture and cloud pattern, holding one sword in each hand. He had to take full advantage of this trip. Otherwise, why else did all of them insist on carrying their swords whenever they came to visit the Ning Manor? It certainly wasn't to show off their swords to Nailin Yeshing. Can't you two eat a bit more? Don't be so shy. Chen Sanqiu encouraged with a sullen expression as he sharpened his two swords. Meanwhile, Dong Huafu and Daizhong had already stepped onto the sparring platform, and Ning Yao raised a hand to activate a mountain and water formation. This place was where her parents had once trained, so Dong Huafu and Daizhong could safely go all out here without having to worry about any of their sword chi spilling out of the formation. Chen Pingan was watching the pair of combatants from afar. Dong Huafu and Daizhang's bonded flying swords were elaborate makeup and mountain suppressing, respectively, and the sizes of the two swords varied drastically, as did the battle styles of their wielders. Dong Huafu's flying sword placed heavy emphasis on speed, while Daizhang's flying sword was all about stability. Dong Huafu was able to wield the light and nimble elaborate makeup like a tree branch, while Daizhong had to lug around the massive mountain suppressing with her single arm. Whenever Daizhang's sword struck the ground, a flurry of sparks would be raised, whereas Dong Huafu's flying sword was much more understated and lacking in spectacle. Chen Pingan asked Yanjua how hard the two of them were fighting, in response to which Yanjua estimated that the two combatants were unleashing about 70% to 80% of their full power. Otherwise, according to him, Daizhong would have undoubtedly already suffered some blood injuries at this point. However, she didn't shy away from such injuries. Instead, they only seemed to embolden her. The sparring matches often followed a certain script, which was that in the first half of the battle, Dong Huafu would be well and truly on top, inflicting a multitude of injuries upon Daizhong. However, all it would take was a light blow from mountain suppressing to land, and Dong Huafu would be sent flying with blood gushing out of his mouth, instantly ending the battle. Sure enough, this battle seemed to be no exception to this norm. Daizhang's sword-wielding arm had just been pierced through by Dong Huafu's bonded flying sword, but that instantly brought about a shift in her aura, and up to that point, Chen Pingan had already seen enough. Thus, he turned his attention away from the battle, and made his way over to Chen Sanqiu. If he had to face either Dong Huafu or Daizhong in battle, he knew what strategies he would have to employ in order to defeat them, whether it be in a battle of life and death or just a sparring match. Hence there was no point in continuing to spectate the battle. Sure, he could humor Yanjue by pretending to be terrified, feigning a pale complexion as his lips quivered in fear, all the while pretending that he was doing his best to put on a composed facade. If it were someone else in Yanjue's shoes, perhaps Chen Pingan would have done just that. However, these people were all Ningyao's closest friends and comrades who had been through life and death together, so he pledged to treat them with sincerity and integrity, rather than to fool them for his amusement. Chen Sancho was still sharpening his swords, swiping scripture and cloud pattern against the dragon-slaying cliff in an alternating fashion, and it was clear from his well-rehearsed movements that he had done this many times before. "Don't mind me, young Master Chen," Chen Sancho said with a smile. "I don't mind at all, young Master Chen," Chen Pingan replied with a smile of his own as he tucked his hands up their opposite sleeves, then crouched down to closely observe the pair of swords scraping against the dragon-slaying cliff. "In fact, I can even help you sharpen your swords if you'd like." "I'm afraid I can't take you up on that offer," Chen Sancho refused with a shake of his head. "Aoyang once told me that a swordsman's bonded flying swords are their lifeblood, so they can't just be casually handed over to someone else." Chen Pingan smiled and nodded in response as he continued to observe the two swords slowly eating into the dragon-slaying cliff, making such minute incisions that they were virtually negligible. "It feels so strange hearing both of them refer to each other as young Master Chen," Yanjue remarked. Ningyao didn't say anything. "What exactly is Chen Pingan's cultivation base?" Yanjue asked. "Don't tell me he's actually a lower 5 tiers cultivator. If that's the case, then what tier is he as a martial artist? Is he really at the Vajrabhati tier?" "Normally, I don't have much respect for pure martial artists, but thanks to our Yin clan's ties to Stalactite Mountain, we've dealt with some far-roaming tier and even mountain summit tier martial artists in the past. From what I've heard, there are no slouches among martial artists who are able to reach the 3 mind-tempering tiers, and it's certainly not every day that you see a Vajrabhati tier martial artist as young as Chen Pingan. Honestly, I'm really itching to have a go at him. What do you say, Ningyao? Do I have your approval to challenge him?" As a swordsman, Yanjue was undoubtedly worthy of the prodigy title, but there was still a significant gap between him and Ningyao, and even when it came to the other 3 members of their friendship group, Yanjue's record against them in sparring matches was less than stellar. Hence, it was no wonder that he was itching at the prospect of being able to pick on a martial artist who was yet to reach the far-roaming tier. There were 2 sparring platforms in the Ning Manor, one large and one small. The small one was currently occupied by Dong Huafu and Daizhong, while the large one was further away and renowned for its enormous area. In fact, it was known far and wide on the Swordqi Great Wall as a minute small world. From the outside, it didn't appear all that large, but as soon as one set foot on the platform, they would come to realize that there was much more to it than met the eye. If he were to face Chen Pingan there, he would have a significant advantage as a swordsman. He would be able to take to the skies and freely harass Chen Pingan with his flying sword while the latter was relegated to the ground. Just the mere thought had Yanjue eagerly rubbing his hands together in gleeful anticipation. "If you want to spar with him, then go ask him," Ningyao said. "If he agrees, then I won't get in your way. If he refuses, then I can't convince him otherwise." Yanjue was still a little hesitant. Granny Bai is the only martial arts master around these parts. If Granny Bai fights Chen Pingan on equal footing, restricting her own cultivation base to the Vajrabhati tier to match his, how many punches would he be able to withstand from her? 3, 5, 10? Yanjue asked. An amused smile was threatening to spread across Ningyao's face, but she quickly suppressed it in order to avoid blowing her cover as she feigned a nonchalant expression and replied. "He actually fought Granny Bai in a sparring match earlier, but it ended very quickly. I wasn't there at the time and I only heard about it in passing from Grandpa Nalen after the event, so I don't know the exact details, but from what I heard, the two of them only exchanged a few blows before ending the sparring match." He was able to exchange a few blows with Granny Bai? That's very impressive, even if she restricted her cultivation base to the Vajrabhati tier. Yanjue remarked as he began rubbing his hands together again. "It sounds like he'll be a worthy opponent. Like I said, as long as Chen Pingan agrees, you can spar with him however you like." Ningyao shrugged. "What if I accidentally injure him with my flying sword?" Yanjue asked in a careful manner. "You're not going to seek retribution against me for him, are you?" "Rest assured, I can promise you that I definitely won't direct my sword at Chen Pingan's face. If I do, then it's automatically my loss. Ning Yao offered no response, eager to see Yanjue shoot himself in the foot. Whenever Dong Huafu or Dai Zhang made a false move in their sparring matches, Ning Yao would immediately point out their mistakes without mincing her words, and they would commit her teachings to memory. Ning Yao had always had a habit of instructing others in their swordsmanship, even back when they had first met, but at the time, Yanjue and the others felt like her advice was terrible, and that following the advice only compounded their mistakes. Later, Aoyang explained to them that this was because Ning Yao's advice was too advanced and beyond what they could comprehend at their current cultivation bases and levels of experience. He told them that the value of her advice would become apparent once they reached a sufficient cultivation base to truly understand. As it turned out, Aoyang was right. In private, Chen Sancho had admitted that the reason he worked so hard in his cultivation and training was that he was determined not to allow the gap in cultivation base between himself and Ning Yao to stretch beyond 2 tiers. Battles between swordsmen were often relatively brief affairs, especially in sparring matches, where both sides were holding back somewhat. If it weren't for the fact that Dong Huafu and Dai Zhang had intentionally dragged things out a bit for more sparring practice, the match would have already been over in just a few minutes. After the sparring match concluded, Ning Yao made her way onto the sparring platform and began pointing out some of the smaller flaws that she had spotted during the battle. The two of them listened intently, neither of them embarrassed by the prospect of receiving instruction in swordsmanship from their friend. It had long been made clear to every prodigy of their generation that Ning Yao was different from them, and this all stemmed from a joking remark that the old great sword immortal had once made. He said that there were 2 types of young prodigies on the Sword Qi Great Wall. One was Ning Yao and the other was everyone else. Even if they didn't like it, there was nothing they could do because it wasn't like they could beat her in a fight. However, the old great sword immortal had also said something similar to Ning Yao, except it was pertaining to the martial artists of the majestic world, as opposed to the young swordsmen of the Sword Qi Great Wall. According to him, the young martial artists of the majestic world could also be split up into 2 similar categories. However, Ning Yao was unconvinced and directly rebuked him, telling him that he was wrong. She told him that she was unable to prove it for the moment, but someday someone would prove her point for her. This refutation seemed to have been exactly what the old man had been waiting for, and at the time, he hadn't told her that she was wrong, nor had he conceded that she was right. Instead, he merely said that they would just have to wait and see. In reality, Ning Yao had immediately begun regretting her remarks as soon as they slipped out of her mouth. She had only said what she did because she wanted to stand up for Chen Pingan, and she hadn't anticipated that the old great sword immortal would take her seriously. Ning Yao had no intention of telling Chen Pingan about this exchange. Otherwise, given his personality, he would undoubtedly take it seriously as well. Back in the Jewel's small world, she had set him a completely arbitrary target, telling him to complete 1,000,000 repetitions of his 6-step, walking meditation before he moved on to anything else. To her exasperation and bewilderment, the next time they met on Stalactite Mountain, he told her that he was only several tens of thousands of repetitions away from 1,000,000. At the time, Ning Yao was almost unable to suppress the urge to punch him in the head, to see if there was actually a brain in that thick skull of his. Could he not tell that she had only said that as a joke to placate him? From that point onward, she felt like she had to constantly tread on eggshells when speaking to him in case he took another one of her joking remarks seriously. Yanjue crouched down beside Chen Pingan, then said in a quiet voice, "Young Master Chen, I've invented a set of fist techniques of my own. Can I demonstrate them for you for some guidance?" "Sure, go ahead," Chen Pingan replied with a smile. Yanjue immediately sprang to his feet, then performed a set of unsightly fist techniques that made Chen Sancho's eyes sting. Dong Huafu and Dai Zhang clearly didn't think highly of Yanjue's fist techniques either, and both of them hurriedly looked away, worried that they would go blind if they stared for even a moment too long. To their surprise, not only did Chen Pingan watch the entire demonstration from start to finish, he did so with an approving smile, feeling as if these fist techniques were very similar in nature to Pei Qian's deranged demon sword techniques. "What do you think, young Master Chen?" Yanjue asked, his eyes glowing with excitement. "You certainly possess a lot of aura and flair," Chen Pingan praised with a smile and a nod. "In fact, I'd go as far as to say that your aura is unassailable. And in a battle between master martial artists, aura is key. So you're already halfway to becoming a martial arts master yourself. Chen Sanchio's hand almost slipped as he sharpened his swords, and a familiar sense of absurdity welled up in his heart. He couldn't help but wonder if Chen Pingan had learned his martial arts from Aoyang. The problem with that theory was that while Aoyang was an exceptional swordsman and also well-versed in a diverse range of mystical abilities, he had never proclaimed himself to be an expert martial artist. How about a sparring match, young Master Chen? Yanzhua proposed with a smile. Chen Pingan took a glance at Ning Yao, but she refused to meet his gaze. After some thought he replied, "I'll pass." Yanzhua's smile faded as he did away with his usual joking demeanor, and he said in a serious voice, "Chen Pingan, unless you remain in the Ning Manor for the entire duration of your stay, and don't go anywhere, you're not going to be able to avoid a fight or two. Over the past 3 days, not only has that scoundrel Qishou taken an interest in you, but even Pang Yuanji and Gao Yeho have been prowling as well. Those two may not harbor any ill will toward you, but at the very least, they're very curious about you." "I see," Chen Pingan said. Out of the younger generation of the Sword Qi Great Wall, Ning Yao was naturally on a level of her own, but according to Bai Lianshuang and Nalin Yexing, all of the young sword prodigies could roughly be split up into 3 categories. Pang Yuanji, Qishou, and Gao Yeho were the 3 most exceptional talents, deemed to possess the potential to become great sword immortals. Just because they possessed this potential didn't mean that they would actually be able to fulfill it, but at the very least, the 3 of them undoubtedly outshone everyone else in terms of cultivation base and aptitude. Among those 3, Gao Yeho came from a very humble background, just like Dai Zhang. However, since then, he had enjoyed a meteoric rise and had married a young mistress from one of the top clans on the Sword Qi Great Wall. Qishou came from the Qi clan, while Pang Yuanji was considered to be a flawless young man with no faults to speak of. He was born into a middle-class family, but as soon as he was delivered, a breathtaking phenomenon instantly followed. Ever since he was a child, he had been cultivating under the erratic Lord Hidden Official, so he was technically half a disciple of hers. Pang Yuanji was also on very familiar terms with the sages of the 3 teachings stationed on the Sword Qi Great Wall, and he often went to them to learn and ask questions. Hence, if Qishou were considered the best fit for Ning Yao in terms of status, then Pang Yuanji was the best fit for Ning Yao purely in terms of personal qualities. The category below those 3 was the one that Dong Huafu and the others fell into. While the third and final category of prodigies were outshone by their more talented peers, this certainly didn't mean that they were anywhere near mediocrity. In fact, if they were to appear on the northern complete reed continent, all of the continent's top sects would be fighting tooth and nail against each other to recruit these prodigies. However, on the Sword Qi Great Wall, the term prodigy didn't mean much. Only prodigies who lived for long enough could be truly considered prodigies. If you can't even defeat me, then as soon as you step outside, you'll only be able to win a single battle at most, Yanzhua continued. To be honest, I don't consider you a friend, and I could hardly care less if you were embarrassed as soon as you set foot outside the Ning Manor. But I'm a friend of Ning Yao's, and I don't want to see the man chosen by her being trampled into the dirt. If that happens, maybe Ning Yao won't care and you can hardly be faulted, but I think I can speak on behalf of Dong Huafu, Dai Zhang, and Chen Sanchio when I say that we'll be too embarrassed to even show our faces on the streets. You said you owe us your gratitude for staying by Ning Yao's side for 10 years. I don't know what the others think, but I, for one, haven't accepted your gratitude. If you can beat me, then I'll accept it. Even if you beat me to a pulp, that's fine. I can take it. In fact, the more easily you can crush me, the happier I'll be for Ning Yao. Does that make you upset? Not at all, Chen Pingan replied with a shake of his head. Then what are you still standing there for? Yanzhua yelled. Come. All those people outside are waiting for you. There's no hurry, Chen Pingan said with a shake of his head. I'm going to make a trip outside first. If you still want to spar with me when I come back, then I'm happy to oblige. Yanzhua was just about to erupt into a furious tirade, but he didn't want to insult Chen Pingan in front of Ning Yao, so he reined in his temper as he snapped. What the hell is wrong with you? Listen to me. You fight me first, and we'll pretend that our sparring match ended in a tie with both of us sustaining injuries, then, all of a sudden, Yanzhua's voice became caught in his throat. Chen Pingan had appeared directly before him without any warning, his hands still tucked up their opposite sleeves as he asked in an indifferent manner. Why should I pretend to have sustained injuries? To avoid having to fight? I've fought quite a few battles on my way to the Sword Chi Great Wall. 3 more won't hurt. How did you do that? Yanjue asked in a quiet voice. Are all pure martial artists this fast? Let's put some distance between each other and try that again. I was too angry just now, so I wasn't paying attention. Chen Pingan pulled a talisman out of his sleeve as he smiled and explained. I used a land-shortening talisman. It can help us pure martial artists instantly cover long distances. A look of realization appeared on Yanjue's face. Chen Pingan stowed the talisman away. However, Yanjue quickly realized that he had been duped and he yelled, Who the hell are you trying to fool, Chen Pingan? You just showed me the talisman, so you didn't even use it. Don't forget that I have 2 hands, Chen Pingan said with a smile. He then turned to Daizhong with an apologetic expression as he said, I meant no offense to you, Daizhong. None taken, Daizhong replied with a smile and a shake of her head. I'm not so petty that I would get offended by something so trivial. There's no need to tiptoe around the fact that I'm missing an arm. In fact, I don't really mind even if you make jokes about it at my expense. Big Sister Ning once jokingly asked me what I would do if I fell in love with a man, and he tried to embrace me. I've been thinking about this problem myself. What would be the best way to return his embrace with just 1 arm? Ning Yao hurriedly squeezed Dai Zhang's cheeks together to shut her up, while Dong Huafu looked on in amazement. It was quite an eye-opening experience to learn that even Ning Yao would talk about such things. Ning Yao turned an inquisitive gaze to Chen Pingan, and the latter gave her a smile and a nod. Only then did she turn to the others and say, Let's go find a place to drink somewhere near Dai Zhang's shop. Even as they left the Ning Manor, Ning Yao was still silently reprimanding Dai Zhang with her eyes, while Dai Zhang apologized profusely, but the grin on her face clearly showed that there wasn't much sincerity behind her apologies. Dong Huafu trailed along at the back of the group, already accustomed to his position there. Meanwhile, Chen Sanxiu and Yanjue were standing on either side of Chen Pingan like a pair of bodyguards, and Yanjue whispered, With the speed that you showed earlier and your power as a Vajrabadi tier martial artist, you may be able to win your first 2 battles with some luck. Rest assured, if you lose your 3rd battle, I'll personally carry you back to the Ning Manor on my back. Don't listen to him, Chen Sanxiu scoffed. An outsider like you is definitely going to be challenged, but there are rules in place to ensure that your challengers don't go too far. Your cultivation foundation definitely isn't going to be harmed, and it's not like anyone has a vendetta against you, so no one's going to go out of their way to try and hurt you. There were several groups of young swordsmen gathered outside the Ning Manor, but none of them said anything as Ning Yao and her group stepped out into the open. From there, the group made its way to Dai Zhang's shop, but before they could get there, they passed through a street that was almost entirely deserted. The street was lined with wine shops, and there were many people who had already gathered at the wine shops in advance, eager to see the show. Most of them were drinking in silence, but there was a sense of palpable anticipation in the air. A young man with a long sword hanging from his waist was already standing in the middle of the street, and he slowly stepped forward. Ning Yao only took a brief glance at him before returning her attention to her conversation with Dai Zhang. That's Ren Yi, Yanjue informed. He's a Dragon Gate tier swordsman, and his bonded flying sword is called. Knowing his name and cultivation base is already enough, Chen Pingan interrupted. Otherwise, I'd be gaining an unfair advantage. Ren really is living up to his reputation as Qishou's #1 lackey, Chen Sanxiu scoffed. He's like an aggressive guard dog, biting whoever his master tells him to bite. Ren drew to a halt around 50 meters away, then challenged, Care for a spar, Chen Pingan? Chen Pingan took a few steps forward as he asked, What if I say no? Ren placed a hand on the hilt of his sword as he sneered. If you refuse, then that means you're scared, and there's no need to draw my sword against a coward. All of a sudden, everyone saw a blur flash past their eyes, and only after it had sped past did a belated thump ring out from the ground. The entire street shuddered, and many of the lower 5-tier swordsmen present began swearing loudly as the cups and bowls of wine on their tables had been jolted up into the air, causing much of the wine within to spill out. As for the middle 5-tier swordsmen, most of them were keeping their bowls and cups rooted to their tables with their sword chi, and their attention remained focused on the 2 combatants. There were also some upper 5-tier sword immortals present, and they largely ignored the spilled wine and clattering cups and bowls. Ran Yi was astonished to discover that his opponent had appeared directly in front of him. Chen Pingan had one hand clasped behind his back, while his other hand was firmly gripping Ran Yi's arm, preventing the latter from being able to draw his sword. There was a smile on his face as he mused. Having no need to draw your sword and being unable to draw your sword are two entirely different concepts. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan vanished from the spot in a wraith-like fashion to evade a flying sword, only to instantly reappear before Ran Yi, once again gripping onto the latter's arm to prevent him from drawing his sword. After several repetitions of this, Ran Yi decided to change tack, rising up into the air so that he could open up some distance between himself and his opponent, thereby allowing him to attack as he pleased from his aerial vantage point. However, even though his bonded flying sword was renowned for its speed, it wasn't even able to graze Chen Pingan's robe. As soon as Ran Yi rose up into the air to enact his new strategy, his opponent's hand appeared on his shoulder, firmly pressing him back down to earth. Aren't swordsmen supposed to be particularly adept in close-quarters combat? Chen Pingan asked, but Ran Yi refused to be distracted. The chopsticks of the wine shops that lined the streets flew out of their holders at his behest, and he planned to use them as makeshift flying swords. Given the sheer number of these flying swords, there was surely no way that Chen Pingan could continue to evade them all. Meanwhile, his actual flying sword returned to his side, circling around him in a defensive manner as he sprang back in retreat. At this point, he had already completely given up on trying to use his flying sword to strike his opponent. However, he knew that what he was doing was only delaying the inevitable, and his only hope now was to be able to save some face and suffer a less humiliating loss. At this point, Chen Pingan could have already easily ended the battle with a punch, but clearly, he wanted to toy with his opponent to pile on the embarrassment. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan appeared right beside Ran Yi, then plucked the latter's flying sword out of midair between his thumb and index finger. After that, he pressed a hand against Ran Yi's head and shoved him into a nearby wine shop. He did so with just enough force to send Ran Yi stumbling, but not so much force that his momentum would cause him to knock over the street-side tables. After Ran Yi had a chance to steady himself, Chen Pingan casually tossed his flying sword back to him. Furious and utterly humiliated, Ran Yi flew away without a word. Following his departure, a handsome white-robed young man stood up from a wine shop. Unlike Ran Yi, he wasn't carrying a sword, and he made his way onto the street as he accused, "How dare a mere martial artist like yourself try to humiliate the swordsman of our Sword Chi Great Wall? Looks like you need to be taught a lesson in respect." Countless flying swords appeared around the young man as he spoke, and there were even more flying swords lining up on the street behind him, resembling a battalion of miniature aerial soldiers waiting to be deployed. There was definitely only a single bonded flying sword among them, but it was going to be extremely difficult to pinpoint. What was most troublesome about this new challenger was that he could substitute his flying swords at will, so essentially every single flying sword could be his bonded flying sword at any given moment. Yanzhuo was just about to strike up a conversation with Chan Sanqiu so that he could tip Chen Pingan off and provide him with some information about his new opponent, but Ning Yao had already raised a hand to stop him, so he could only remain silent. Chen Pingan cast his gaze directly forward at the oncoming torrent of flying swords. He sidestepped his way into a nearby wine shop, but as soon as he did so, around a dozen flying swords split off from the main cluster before racing into the wine shop to intercept him. Chen Pingan ducked and weaved his way through the oncoming flying swords as he sprang back and forth from one wine shop to another, while the patrons of the wine shops yelled in displeasure. All the while, Chen Pingan was steadily closing the distance between himself and his opponent. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan stepped out onto the street, then began sprinting forward with a great deal of urgency, doing away with his previously casual and lazy demeanor. The white-robed young man was a golden courtier swordsman, and his brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. However, a faint smile then appeared on his face as he made a hand seal. In the blink of an eye, Chen Pingan pounced onto his opponent before throwing an almighty punch, but his fist only shattered an afterimage of the white-robed young man, while his true body appeared within the sword formation further down the street, looking very graceful and composed. Many of the little girls and young women spectating the battle were gazing upon him with looks of admiration in their eyes, and it was clear who they were hoping would come out on top in this battle. However, it seemed like Chen Pingan was only just beginning to display his true speed, and he had already turned into an indistinct blur in the eyes of all of the spectating swordsmen below the golden core tier. His flying sword is not fast enough. It's his loss, a young man in a set of coarse linen clothes remarked. Drinking at the same table was a one-eyed man with a big beard, and he nodded in agreement as he raised his wine bowl to take a sip. Within mere moments, the white-robed young man had already been scattered before reappearing several times in succession, but it seemed that his efforts were futile, and the gap between him and Chen Pingan was being steadily closed. Finally, he was caught, with Chen Pingan pressing a hand into his face, but instead of shoving him like he had done with Rani, Chen Pingan slammed him into the ground, smashing a huge crater into the street as he said, "What's worthy of respect is the Sword Chi Great Wall itself, not you or any of its inhabitants. If you want respect from me, then you'll have to earn it." With that, Chen Pingan stood up straight again as he looked around and asked, "Who's next? If you're going to challenge me, make sure your flying sword is fast enough. Otherwise, no matter how many you have, it won't do you any good." The entire street was completely silent. Chen Pingan's eyes narrowed slightly as he continued, "I've heard that someone by the name of Qishou has had his eyes on my Ningyao and her dragon-slaying platform for quite some time. I hope your flying sword is fast enough." Ningyao was just about to speak, but Chen Pingan somehow knew that she was going to speak even without turning to look at her, and he merely lifted a hand before giving her a reassuring wave. Ningyao fell silent. "Even I'm tempted to challenge him now, let alone Qishou," the young man in the coarse linen clothes chuckled. Chen Pingan turned to the young man with a smile as he said, "I'd welcome a challenge from you, Peng Yuanji." "I'm worried that I'll kill you," Peng Yuanji said in a serious manner. "Likewise," Chen Pingan replied. Peng Yuanji faltered slightly at this response, then gave Chen Pingan a thumbs up. Even on the Sword Chi Great Wall, the only people who dared to speak to him like this were at least nascent tier swordsmen. It wasn't that Peng Yuanji was looking down on Chen Pingan. Instead, he simply looked down on the entire majestic world. Most of his negative feelings toward the majestic world consisted of a sense of resentment, interspersed with a hint of enmity. If it weren't for people like Aoyang Zuoyu and the swordsmen of the northern complete reed continent, who represented the majestic world in a positive light, Peng Yuanji's resentment of the prosperous and complacent majestic world would have been nothing short of unadulterated hatred. There was clearly no need for any further conversation, so Peng Yuanji finished what remained of his bowl of wine, then stood up from his table and slowly made his way out onto the street. The big bearded man, missing an eye, continued to drink without even looking up. Peng Yuanji had no interest in romance, and even though he was considered one of the two young prodigies of the Sword Chi Great Wall most worthy of becoming Ningyao's Dao partner, he could hardly care less about who she liked. The only things that Peng Yuanji cared about were his status as a swordsman of the Sword Chi Great Wall, and the Lord Hidden Official's disciple. Peng Yuanji stood in the middle of the street with an air of jaded maturity about him that was completely unbefitting a young man only 25 years of age, and he said, "Chen Pingan, I have nothing against you, but I have a lot of gripes against the majestic world." In the cultivation world of the majestic world, even if Peng Yuanji had only been an abode tier or sea observation tier cultivator at his current age, he would have already easily been considered the top prodigy of the average immortal power. Even in the mortal world of the majestic world, his talents for academics would have almost certainly allowed him to perform exceptionally in the imperial examination, thereby granting him a bright future in politics. However, he was relegated to the Sword Chi Great Wall, which many people had denounced as a godforsaken place that even birds wouldn't care to shit on. This was only a figurative statement, but it actually held some truth. Due to the immense pervasive Sword Chi present all over the Sword Chi Great Wall, there were never any birds around. Back when Aoyang was still around, he had told Peng Yuanji, among a bunch of other children his age at the time, that if they ever had the chance to do so, then they had to go to Stalactite Mountain, then go even further beyond. According to him, every single continent in the majestic world was teeming with beautiful women, and all of them would quickly be able to find wives for themselves. Every child on the Sword Chi Great Wall, as long as they weren't blind, saw more sword immortals throughout their lifetime than the average upper 5 tiers cultivator of the majestic world. Even when they played out on the streets, they would frequently run into sword immortals purchasing wine from the street-side shops, Not to mention the fact that sword immortals soaring through the heavens atop their flying swords was a very common sight here. I have nothing against you either, but I don't like how people talk about you and Ning Yao, Chen Pingan answered with a smile. The chatter in the wine shops and restaurants that lined the street instantly became louder and more animated. Even the arrogant young swordsman of the northern complete reed continent would not dare to behave with such conceited insolence upon first arriving at the Sword Chi Great Wall. Such a brash and bull-headed outsider was one that hadn't been seen on the Sword Chi Great Wall for at least the past century. The northern complete reed continent was the continent of the majestic world that had the strongest ties with the Sword Chi Great Wall, but every single young swordsman of the northern complete reed continent was sure to receive a stern warning from their seniors prior to their arrival on Stalactite Mountain. These warnings came in different forms depending on the personalities of these seniors, but they all essentially espoused the same message. Make sure to rein in your temper on the Sword Chi Great Wall. Avoid conflict as much as possible and do not be rude to anyone. There are extremely few rules on the Sword Chi Great Wall, which seems like a good thing, but it also means that you won't be granted any protection if you get yourself in trouble. The Sword Chi Great Wall was perhaps the only place under the heavens treated with such a high degree of caution and reverence by the normally reckless swordsmen of the northern complete reed continent. Dong Bude was standing on the second floor of a nearby restaurant, surrounded by a bunch of other young women her age, as well as some younger girls who were still rather tender and childlike in appearance. Almost all of them were staring at Peng Yuanji with looks in their eyes ranging from admiration to infatuation. In their eyes, as long as Ning Yao didn't want him, all of them still had chances. At this moment, Dong Bude was feeling a little concerned, worried that her foolish brother would somehow get himself swept up into this conflict. Qi Shou had a small faction of his own, and the young swordsmen in his circle were not inferior to those in Ning Yao's faction in the slightest. In fact, his faction was likely the stronger one on an overall basis, and that wasn't even to mention the fact that he had the backing of the formidable Qi clan. Given that Rani had just been thoroughly humiliated by Chen Pingan, Dong Bude's worry was that this could easily escalate into a full-blown conflict between the two factions, at which point Dong Huafu would have no choice but to get involved. Having said that, her concern was also interspersed with a hint of excitement and anticipation. She loved a good fight just as much as everyone else on the Sword Chi Great Wall, and if a conflict did break out, she would be the first one to charge into the fray. A young girl with a chubby, childish face was standing on the tips of her toes, peering over the windowsill as she nodded in approval and remarked, "That guy's pretty handsome. You can all like Peng Yuanji all you want, but from now on I've decided to like Chen Pingan. Big Sister Dong, make sure to tell me right away if Big Sister Ning decides to dump him someday. That way, I'll be able to swoop in and take him. I can't wait to get married. The wedding gowns that they sell in the shops are so beautiful, and they're so smooth and slippery to touch." Dong Bude kicked the little girl in the backside as she scoffed in amusement. Normally girls become infatuated with men, but you're just infatuated with the idea of getting to wear a wedding gown. The young girl rubbed her own sore backside in indignation, then pushed away the other girls around her who were having a good laugh at her expense as she yelled, "You're one to talk, Big Sister Dong. My mother says you're an old maid who's past the age for marriage and will never get to put on a wedding gown. I'm an old maid, is that right?" Dong Bude asked through gritted teeth as she grabbed onto the little girl's head and slammed it repeatedly down onto the windowsill. After she finally relented, the young girl rubbed her own forehead as she hurriedly turned to Dong Bude with a fawning smile and amended, "I misspoke just now, Big Sister Dong. What I meant to say is that you're a fair young maiden. You'll be 18 forever. More like 80 forever." The girl scoffed to herself internally. Dong Bude grabbed onto her head and began slamming it down repeatedly again as she scoffed. "More like 80 forever, right? You're as easy to read as an open book." All of a sudden, Dong Bude released the little girl's head as she exclaimed, "I knew it. There's no way Qi Shou would have gone to so much effort, only to give Peng Yuanji the chance to take all the glory." The little girl's eyes instantly lit up once she heard that Qi Shou was also getting involved, and she shoved aside another young girl who was blocking her view as she put on a mature facade and mused, "If I were Qi Shou, I would already be fighting Chen Pingan by now." A third person had appeared on the street, and it was none other than Qi Shou. He was a tall and imposing young man with a handsome and clean-shaven appearance, and he smiled as he said, "Let me have a go, Yuanji. He's already humiliated two of my subordinates, so I have to stand up for them. Otherwise, everyone will think I'm scared of him. Peng Yuanji turned to him with a conflicted expression. Qishou directed his gaze past Peng Yuanji toward Chen Pingan. From what he had heard, Chen Pingan was quite young and had come from the tiny eastern treasured Vile continent. He had visited the Sword Qi Great Wall once around 10 years ago, but during that visit, he had stayed atop the city walls the entire time to practice his fist techniques. The feat that he was most renowned for was his 3 consecutive losses to Chao Ci. And the other thing that had gained him some renown was a story that had initially spread from the Dong clan, claiming that Ning Yao had once declared that she could beat up 100 Chen Pinganis with just a single hand. Needless to say, neither of these stories painted him in a particularly flattering light. Truth be told, it wasn't really much of an embarrassment to lose to Chao Ci or to be teased by Ning Yao, but the fact that Ning Yao was willing to make such a joke at Chen Pingan's expense had Qishou feeling very disgruntled. Only one of us will be able to challenge him, so why don't we also take this opportunity to settle the score between us? The 2 of us can fight first, and the winner will get to challenge Chen Pingan, Peng Yuanji suggested with a smile. A hesitant look appeared on Qishou's face. Everyone immediately began cheering at this proposal, encouraging the 2 swordsmen to engage in a battle first. Some people were already preparing to take bets on the outcome of their clash, as well as how many exchanges it would take for a decisive outcome to be reached. These were all tricks of the trade that they had picked up from Aoyang. Prior to Aoyang's influence, bets were only made on the outcomes of battles, but he had opened everyone's eyes to a whole new world of gambling, and ever since then, gambling stations had begun taking bets on over a dozen different things. Earlier, the only bets made on Chen Pingan pertained to whether he would even leave the Ning Manor at all. There were no other bets made on him because the popular opinion was that he most likely wouldn't leave the Ning Manor, so it would be pointless to consider anything else. However, not only had he left the Ning Manor, but he had also won 2 battles in the blink of an eye, before the betting stations even had a chance to take bets on the outcomes of the 2 battles. Only then did everyone come to realize that gambling simply felt a bit dull and uninspired without Aoyang running the betting stations. Back then, all those who sat down at the betting table were guaranteed an exhilarating experience, regardless of whether they won or lost. The only problem was that Aoyang had been very unscrupulous in the way that he ran his betting stations. On one occasion, he had worked with an accomplice to set a trap for everyone. This accomplice of his was constantly betting on the smaller odds and winning every single time. Swayed by his winnings, most of the other gamblers decided to copy him, determined to make Aoyang lose so much that he would have to sell even the clothes on his back. However, that was when the trap was sprung, and not only did Aoyang recover all of the money that he had lost up to that point in one fell swoop, but he had even earned himself close to a year's worth of wine money. His accomplice had put on a very convincing act. For that final bet, he had gambled everything that he had, and after losing he fell unconscious on the spot, having apparently just gone completely bankrupt with that single loss. However, it was later discovered that he had received a large cut of the profits from Aoyang, consisting of a sum of dozens of grain rain coins, but by the time the ruse was uncovered, he had already gone into hiding. After that, Aoyang had snuck him to the gates in the dead of night, and the 2 old friends had parted ways with both their coffers bulging with grain rain coins. If it weren't for the fact that the old woman from the Taoist saber room had revealed the truth to everyone in a fit of disgruntled exasperation, all of the scammed gamblers would have most likely still been completely in the dark even to this day. Even though Aoyang had done many things to infuriate the men of the Sword Qi Great Wall, they still missed him dearly for the joy and excitement that he had brought to everyone. As Peng Yuanji and Qishou made their way onto the street, Chen Pingan had examined both of them closely, making mental notes of details like their stride lengths, the weight of their footsteps, their postures, the subtle shifts in their auras, and the cadence of their breathing. It seemed like a lot, but it was only a matter of taking a few glances. From his brief observation, Chen Pingan found it more difficult to make an assessment of Peng Yuanji. Of course, that was perhaps simply because Qishou didn't care to disguise himself, or his disguise was even better than Peng Yuanji's. Chen Pingan had made these observations purely out of habit, just to give himself something to do. He stood in a composed silence, waiting patiently for Peng Yuanji and Qishou to reach an outcome in their negotiation. It didn't matter to him who he had to fight first. He already had around a dozen plans prepared for any sequence that transpired, and thus, he closed his eyes to rest as he waited for an outcome. With one hand clasped behind his back and the other clenched into a loose fist against his abdomen, there was an air of composed elegance about him. Some people had begun hurling insults at him for his conceited display, daring to close his eyes in the face of such formidable rivals, but there were clearly also more people cheering for him. Ning Yao's gaze remained fixed solely on him this entire time. Dai Zhang gently tugged on Ning Yao's sleeve. As usual, she was wearing her dark green robe. She had been wearing the same robe ever since she returned from the majestic world. Even though wearing a Dao robe had its benefits, it was a little absurd that a young woman like her had been wearing the same outfit every day for so many years. Feeling the tug on her sleeve, Ning Yao turned to Dai Zhang with an inquisitive look, and the latter pointed at Chen Pingan with her chin before giving him a thumbs up. Ning Yao's expression remained unchanged, and it seemed that she wasn't surprised or impressed at all by Chen Pingan's relaxed display. Dai Zhang and the others were impressed because they didn't know Chen Pingan as well as she did, but for her, this was exactly how she expected him to behave. Chen Sancho gently patted Yan Zhuo on his chubby cheek as he jibed. To think you were showing off your shitty fist techniques to him earlier. I bet you feel like a fool now. Yan Zhuo slapped Chen Sancho's hand away as he gloated in a triumphant manner. What did I tell you? I knew he was a master martial artist. My eye for talent is truly unmatched. Rennie and Puyu were clearly sent out by Qi Shou to challenge Chen Pingan, and there's a reason why he chose those two, Dong Huafu analyzed. Among the Dragon Gate tier swordsmen, Rennie is quite young, but has a very fast flying sword. If Chen Pingan lost that battle, then that would be that, and he would be completely humiliated. However, after being Rennie, Puyu immediately stepped up to challenge him. Among all of the Golden Core tier swordsmen, Puyu is considered to be all style and no substance, so even if Chen Pingan defeats him, he'll be lulled into a false sense of confidence and complacency, thinking that this was all that the Golden Core tier swordsman of the Sword Qi Great Wall had to offer. That way, it should be easier for Qi Shou to defeat him and take all the glory. Knowing how much of a devious scoundrel Qi Shou is, it's no surprise that he had all of this planned out from the beginning. If even you can figure this out, you think we wouldn't have already seen through his plan? Yan Zhuo scoffed with a roll of his eyes. I'm worried that Qi Shou will pretend to lose control in the heat of battle and take this opportunity to kill Chen Pingan, Dong Huafu said. That's definitely the biggest concern here. Chen Sancho chimed in with a nod. In their eyes, Chen Pingan shouldn't have brought up Ning Yao and the dragon-slaying cliff because that gave Qi Shou an excuse not to follow the rules. Not only was their battle going to be won between romantic rivals, but Chen Pingan's accusation that Qi Shou wished to secure the Ning clan's dragon-slaying cliff meant that the honor of the Qi clan was also on the line. Thus, perhaps the seniors of the Qi clan would be displeased if Qi Shou went overboard and killed Chen Pingan in their battle, but they would be even more displeased if he let Chen Pingan off the hook and failed to defend the honor of the Qi clan. In light of these factors, it was obvious what he had to do. Yan Zhuo sighed as he stroked his chin with a concerned expression. Brother Pingan was a little too reckless at the start. Chen Sancho pondered the situation for a moment, then smiled and said, There's no point in worrying about all of that now. In any case, the fact that Chen Pingan has dared to openly call out both Qi Shou and Pang Yuanji means that I'm willing to accept him as a friend. Truth be told, I wouldn't dare to do what he just did. And for that reason alone, he has my respect. Friends aren't just people who drink and fool around together. True friends have each other's backs. If Qi Shou dares to break the rules, then we'll just have to give him a piece of our minds. Dong Huafu, you can intentionally sustain an injury midway during the battle, so your sister will swoop in to help us. Once she gets involved, all of her friends will inevitably back her up, and I'm sure that'll be enough to keep Qi Shou and his lapdogs in check. However, Ning Yao was much less optimistic as she said, Qi Shou is a far more formidable swordsman than all of you. If he gets too far away, even I won't be able to stop him in time. Hence, we can get a good gauge on Qi Shou's intentions by watching what he does. If he begins intentionally luring Chen Pingan toward Dai Zhang's shop, then that means he fully intends to go in for the kill. In any case, none of you has to do anything but watch. If it really comes down to it, it's not like any of you will be able to stop Qi Shou anyway. Having said that, I'm sure Chen Pingan can already sense Qi Shou's animosity, so he'll definitely also be on his guard. Ning Yao took a glance at the sword on Qi Shou's back as she spoke, while Dai Zhang and the others looked on in a concerned and anxious silence. Dai Zhang knew that this wasn't her forte. At times she felt very thankful that the likes of Chen Sanqiu and Yin Zhuo were good people. Otherwise, if they were to use their intelligence and cunning for nefarious means, then they could truly do some damage. Given their privileged backgrounds, they had broader horizons than their peers, granting them a superior sense of perspective. Matters that were considered impossibly complex for Dai Zhang often appeared much simpler and more straightforward in their eyes, and at the same time, they were able to see and comprehend many things that were simply beyond her. Aoyang had once said that this was, in a way, also a form of swordsmanship. He had also once told Dai Zhang that she would likely have to overcome 2 separate mental hurdles if she wanted to remain friends with Chen Sanqiu and the others on a long-term basis. If she couldn't overcome those hurdles, then there would be no need for death to separate them. Instead, they would simply grow apart over time until they were nothing more than acquaintances. Neither side would be at fault for such an outcome. Instead, it would simply mean that the differences in their upbringing and mentalities were too much to overcome. Are all of you convinced that Chen Pingan will definitely lose? Ning Yao suddenly asked as she turned to Dai Zhang and the others. I can lie to you and say that I think Chen Pingan can beat Qi Shou with just one hand, but if you want to hear the truth, then I'd say that Chen Pingan has no chance, at least not with that sword on Qi Shou's back, Chen Sanqiu said in a pessimistic manner. Ning Yao offered no response. Instead, she turned in a certain direction with her brows tightly furrowed. Sitting on the roof of a restaurant in that direction was a little girl wearing a loose-fitting black robe. Her hair was braided into a pair of adorable twin pigtails, and she was yawning incessantly out of boredom. Finally, she seemed to have run out of patience and she yelled, "Hurry the hell up, Peng Yunji! Why are you being such a coward? You're making an embarrassment of yourself. Just beat up Qi Shou, then fight the other guy. What's so complicated about that?" Chen Pingan's gaze was also drawn to the little girl on the rooftop. Despite her innocuous and childish appearance, she was a terrifying being whose fists were feared even by Ascension-tier great demons. In terms of short-temperedness, the swordsmen of the Dong clan could only rank second on the Sword Qi Great Wall, and that was because this little girl inarguably occupied the top spot. Chen Pingan had once seen her plummet straight down from the top of the Sword Qi Great Wall to engage in a play fight with a nearby great demon. It had been a bona fide immortal tier great demon, but according to the old great sword immortal, the fact that the little girl wasn't able to kill it made her feel like she had lost the battle. Aside from Ning Yao, Chen Pingan, and several sword immortals who were intentionally ignoring the little girl, everyone else on the entire street was horrified, and no one was foolish enough to try to suck up to her. Of course, Hidden Official wasn't actually her name. Instead, it was an ancient official title that had been passed down for many generations. On the Sword Qi Great Wall, the Hidden Official was responsible for overseeing matters related to governance and punishment, among others. Throughout history, there had been many hidden officials who were unfit for the job and were reduced to mere puppets, but ever since she inherited this title, no one dared to look down on the Hidden Official any longer. Not only did she hold the record for killing the most middle 5 tiers demons out of anyone on the Sword Qi Great Wall over the past 1,000 years, she had also killed many of her own comrades who had tried to flee the battlefield south of the Sword Qi Great Wall as deserters. During the 13 battles against the demon tribe, she was the first representative to step up to the plate for the Sword Qi Great Wall. Her opponent was supposed to have been a great demon renowned for its prowess in direct physical brawls, but it conceded the battle as soon as it saw her, causing her to fly into a rage and pound the entire battlefield to bits with her fists. "I'll do as you say, mistress," Peng Yuanji replied with a nod. However, Qi Shou cupped his fist in a salute as he lowered his head and implored, "Please allow me to battle the outsider first, Lord Hidden Official. Regardless of the outcome of the battlefield, I will fight Yuanji immediately after, and it can be a battle to the death if that's what you wish to see." The Hidden Official's eyes instantly lit up at this proposal, and she nodded vigorously as she approved. "That sounds great to me. Hurry up then, don't keep me waiting any longer. All of you can fight to your heart's content. I'll make sure everyone's following the rules. There's no better person than me to officiate a fight." She then turned her gaze to the table where Peng Yuanji had previously been sitting, then demanded, "You there, the guy who's missing an eye, toss me a flagon of wine. Otherwise I'll All of a sudden, the entire wine shop exploded. Fragments of roof tiles were sent flying in all directions, while everything in the wine shop was destroyed and strewn all over the place in a chaotic fashion, and all of the swordsmen inside were instantly knocked unconscious. The man who was missing an eye was an unpolished jade tier sword immortal, and he had just been dealt a kick to the head by the hidden official, sending him crashing straight through the wall. After standing up, he dusted himself off, but didn't return to the wine shop. The hidden official was standing on the only completely unharmed table inside, and with a light stomp of her foot, the flagon on the table sprang up into her grasp. She took a whiff of its contents, and her face immediately puckered up as she wailed. "It smells like piss, but it's still wine. If only I could take even just a tiny sip." A tormented look appeared on her face as she spoke, and she was gritting her teeth in pained frustration. In the instant that the hidden official left the rooftop, Chen Pingan took a step forward, but then immediately retracted his foot as he cast a provocative gaze toward Qishou. Peng Yuanji leaned back and flew back into the demolished wine shop, then casually caught a piece of falling roof tile as he smiled and said, "Need I remind you that the old great sword immortal has forbidden you from drinking wine, mistress? I'm just taking a sniff. What's wrong with that?" The hidden official snapped in an indignant manner. "Who is Chen Qingdu to tell me what to do, anyway? I'm the one in charge of punishments on the Sword Qi Great Wall." However, she then immediately became deflated as she sat on the table with a miserable expression, then tossed the flagon of wine at Peng Yuanji as she sighed. "Hold on to this for me for now." All of a sudden, Chen Pingan ducked his head to the side, right as a streak of light flashed past his ear. It was only a streak of sword qi, yet it was enough to leave a slight gash on his face. He crouched down slightly before pushing off against the ground, upon which he instantly vanished from the spot. Only after he was gone did the earth beneath him rumble audibly as it shattered into a system of deep cracks resembling a cobweb. Immediately thereafter, a streak of even faster sword light flew through the exact spot where Chen Pingan had just been standing, and it would have pierced straight through his heart from behind had he not taken evasive measures. The hidden official gave a slight nod of approval upon seeing this, and her frustration at not being able to drink wine was somewhat assuaged, but she was still mostly just bored, and she grabbed onto her own pigtails and began gently tugging on them for her own entertainment. "Are all Vajrabadi tier martial artists of the majestic world this fast?" Peng Yuanji asked with a smile as he stood beside her in a respectful manner. The hidden official considered his question for a moment, then gave an extremely insightful answer. "I think it might possibly be somewhat rare." Peng Yuanji was also accustomed to such non-answers. There was actually another question that he was much more interested in hearing the answer to, and he asked through his mind's lake, "Mistress, why do I get the feeling that you don't seem to have a very good impression of Chen Pingan? I don't like the look of anyone that Chen Qingdu likes the look of," the hidden official explained with a disdainful sneer. A nascent tier swordsman who wasn't native to the Sword Qi Great Wall had overheard her answer, and in order to silence him, she flicked a finger at him from afar. The swordsman in question was instantly knocked to the ground as if he had been dealt a heavy blow to the forehead, and he would be bedridden for at least half a month. The hidden official felt like she had done him a great favor, allowing him to receive some hospitality in the form of bed rest and care from his hosts on the Sword Qi Great Wall. At what's his name's current cultivation base, he shouldn't have been able to evade those two attacks. He was only able to do so mostly through guessing, the hidden official suddenly said. "Qishou also hasn't displayed anywhere near his full power," Peng Yuanji said with a smile. She sighed in a disappointed manner. "How boring." She then stood up from the table, having had a change of heart as she declared, "You two continue, but I'm not going to stick around to watch anymore. Remember that no fight is a good fight unless it's a fight to the death." With that, the hidden official vanished from the spot, leaving her disciple to shake his head with a wry smile on his face. Meanwhile, on the street, Qishou remained standing completely still on the spot, while his opponent was gradually closing in. For the vast majority of Qi refiners, allowing a martial artist to get close was no different from a death sentence, but the same didn't apply to swordsmen, who were much more lethal in close-quarters combat than all other Qi refiners, and this was particularly true for Qishou because he had more than just a single bonded flying sword. The one that he had already revealed was called Flying Kite, while the other one, by the name of Heartstring, was even faster. and the latter was eagerly waiting for Chen Pingan to rush to his death. Yanzhuo was so on edge that his entire body was completely tensed up, and Dai Zhang and the others were also looking very anxious. In contrast, Ningyao remained as composed as ever. The stakes of this battle were higher for her than for anyone else in her circle of friends, but she appeared the most relaxed and detached. This was where she and Chen Pingan differed the most. Chen Pingan was always thinking meticulously about everything, while Ningyao was much more direct and straightforward with her thought processes. Qi Shou was feeling a little disappointed as he released his second bonded flying sword. The swordsmen of the Qi clan had always been extremely adept at fighting in small areas, and thanks to Heartstring's lethal combination of speed and accuracy, Qi Shou was always able to end his battles very quickly. At this point, the two combatants were only separated by about 10 meters. Even though Chen Pingan was able to avoid a lethal blow at the last second, Heartstring had still pierced through his shoulder, inevitably causing him to become stagnant in his movements for a split second, and that was all the time that Flying Kite needed to glance past his throat. He seemed to have been trapped in a cage formed by the pair of flying swords, yet right as many of the spectators thought that the battle was already over, he abruptly vanished from the spot. Qi Shou continued to remain where he was standing. His third bonded flying sword, Jumping Spider, had always been the most devious and unpredictable of the bunch. From a single flying sword it split up into 2, then 2 into 4, then 4 into 8, and it continued to multiply in that fashion, weaving a web of swords around Qi Shou. Hovering at every single node in the web was a Jumping Spider flying sword that was just over an inch in length. In contrast with Puyu, who was also able to wield many flying swords at once, but only one was actually his bonded flying sword. Every single one of these jumping spiders was a bonded flying sword of Qi Shou's. This was a point of great pride for Qi Shou, and his jumping spider flying sword was the one that the seniors of his clan thought most highly of. After all, this was a bonded flying sword that was truly able to combine offense and defense into one, and the more Qi Shou advanced up the cultivation tiers, the more jumping spiders he would be able to conjure up at once, and the more the flying sword would approach a celestial sword. Once Qi Shou attained sufficient power to support several thousand jumping spiders at once, he would become a near-invincible force on the battlefield. Chen Pingan had reappeared no more than 5 meters away from Qi Shou, but instead of pouncing right away, he channeled his land-shortening immortal technique once again. Qi Shou knew that Chen Pingan was going to appear behind him, so he instantly bolstered his defenses there, and in the blink of an eye, the number of jumping spiders hovering behind him had increased drastically. At the same time, Heartstring was sticking to Chen Pingan like glue, while Flying Kite was constantly harassing him from different directions. Qi Shou didn't have to do anything other than stand completely still to have Chen Pingan dancing frantically on the palm of his hand. His goal was to slowly run Chen Pingan into the ground and exhaust him to death, subjecting him to the most humiliating defeat possible. "This is not looking good," Yanzhuo murmured in a concerned voice. "Flying Kite doesn't pose much of a threat, but if I recall correctly, Qi Shou is currently able to support over 500 jumping spiders at once. Right now, I can only count fewer than 300. On top of that, the longer this battle drags on, the more familiar Heartstring will become with Chen Pingan's soul, and it'll only become faster and faster. The bastard's clearly toying with Chen Pingan on purpose. It can really feel like a hopeless task when you're facing an opponent with multiple flying swords that work well together in tandem." Chen Sancho mused with a wry smile as he shot a concerned glance at Ningyao, but at the very least on the surface it seemed like her resolve hadn't been shaken in the slightest. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan drew to an abrupt halt, and his fist intent was swirling around him with tremendous force, conjuring up a palpable aura that was visible to the naked eye even for some cultivators of the lower 5 tiers. Qi Shou had his back to Chen Pingan, and he immediately sprang forward without any hesitation. His original intention was to remain standing where he was for the duration of the entire battle in order to inflict maximum humiliation upon Chen Pingan, but his intuition told him to abandon the idea as he sprang forward by over 100 feet. At the same time, the number of jumping spiders around him increased once again, forming an even denser and more impenetrable sword formation. From there, he turned around to face Chen Pingan, and a slightly wary look surfaced in his eyes at the sight of the latter's oncoming fist, prompting him to retreat even further. However, in the eyes of all of the bystanders, he still appeared as casual and relaxed as if he were taking a stroll in the park. Meanwhile, Flying Kite and Heartstring were each struck by a streak of sword light. However, the two flying swords that had appeared out of nowhere were laughably weak, only able to obstruct Flying Kite and Heartstring for a moment before they were both sent flying through the air. But that was already enough. Right before Chisho's eyes, Chen Pingan's fist broke through the jumping spider sword formation, and the flesh and skin on his fist were torn to shreds, stripped down to the bone, but even then it was only slowed down slightly. However, that slight falter was enough time for Flying Kite and Heartstring to re-enter the battle, and the faster Heartstring was racing directly toward Chen Pingan, aimed just below his heart. This wasn't supposed to be a battle to the death, after all, and Chisho had no intention of soiling his own reputation just to kill someone that he saw as a pathetic nobody. Meanwhile, Flying Kite was hurtling directly toward Chen Pingan's spinal column from behind. Chisho was curious to see just how much force would be left behind Chen Pingan's punch once those two swords pierced through his body. The physiques of swordsmen were constantly refined day and night by their bonded flying swords, and as a result, their physical constitutions could almost rival those of military and cultivators. With 3 bonded flying swords in his possession, Chisho's physical constitution was far more formidable than even the average swordsman of his cultivation base. In an instant, Chisho instinctively drew upon the immense spiritual energy in all of his major acupoints. A series of mesmerizing phenomena arose within his internal small world at once, and his entire body was enveloped in a resplendent veil of light, while his eyes began to glow with rippling golden radiance. As it turned out, Chen Pingan possessed more than just those 2 virtually useless flying swords. In addition to those, he also possessed a true bonded flying sword, which was racing through the air as a rapid streak of green sword light, striking Heartstring tip to tip. Both flying swords were knocked away by the force of the collision, clearing the path ahead for Chen Pingan's fist. As for Flying Kite, it was being outsped by Chen Pingan, so it was unable to catch up to him and successfully pierce its way through his spine. A trail of blood trickled down from the corner of Chisho's lips after withstanding a punch from Chen Pingan's stripped skeletal fist, but he was put at ease by the observation that there wasn't much force behind Chen Pingan's punch. After clearing the path with his heavy cavalry formation shattering technique, Chen Pingan immediately followed up with his deity drumming technique. All Chisho saw was a blur of activity flash before his eyes, and even though he had already sped up in his retreat thanks to the force of Chen Pingan's initial blow, the latter's second punch was still somehow able to catch up to him before making solid contact. Not only was Flying Kite powerless to do anything, but even Heartstring also seemed a little lost and dazed, forced to clash repeatedly against that streak of green sword light. Each time the 2 flying swords clashed, the air around them would visibly ripple, presenting a marvelous yet deadly spectacle to behold. Isn't Brother Pingan only a 4th-tier chi refiner? Why does he have 3 flying swords? These questions were blurted out by Yanzhua and Chan Sanqiu in unison, and they were left to stare at each other in confusion and bewilderment. All of a sudden, the tables had been turned, and it was Chisho's turn to begin frantically fleeing for cover. He was a swordsman at the pinnacle of the Golden Core tier with a vast wealth of battle experience, yet he had been forced into a fistfight by Chen Pingan. Having said that, even though this wasn't his forte, he was still able to hold his own. After being struck by those initial 2 punches, more and more spiritual energy began to surge out of Chisho's acupoints to bolster his already impressive physical constitution, and after clashing fists with Chen Pingan several times in succession, he decided to go on the offensive himself, exchanging blows with his opponent as if he were also a pure martial artist. One of his punches sent Chen Pingan's head rocking back to a significant degree, but the latter remained as composed and expressionless as ever, as if he were incapable of feeling pain. Furthermore, it seemed like there wasn't any consideration in the placement of his blows, as if he were content just to be landing punches on Chisho at all. Heartstring was fast enough to chase down Chen Pingan, but it was constantly being obstructed by the green flying sword, whereas Flying Kite was perpetually a step behind. The finest of margins made a world of difference in battles between swordsmen. The jumping spider sword formation was already on the verge of collapse, and it was posing less and less of a threat to Chen Pingan. All of the spectators lining the street were stunned by what they were witnessing, and they wondered if they were about to witness a miraculous comeback from the outsider. After 15 punches, Chisho was finally unable to hold his own any longer, and he was knocked down before sliding back over 100 feet along the ground on his back. However, the Dao robe that he was wearing had cushioned the blow, and as he was sliding back, a militarian armor pellet slipped out of his sleeve, instantly encasing his entire body in a suit of golden armor. From there, he slammed a palm into the ground to propel himself to his feet, only to be instantly knocked back down by a punch to the face. It was an extremely powerful blow, slamming Qi Shou to the ground with such immense force that his body bounced back up, only to be mercilessly struck down again by another punch. At this point, blood was flowing freely out of all of Qi Shou's orifices. Peng Yuanji heaved a faint sigh as he observed the battle from afar. He knew that it was about time for Qi Shou to open up some distance between himself and Chen Pingan before drawing the sword on his back. None of the swordsmen of the Sword Qi Great Wall carried around physical swords for style or aesthetics. Instead, they were often trump cards to be used in tandem with their bonded flying swords. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan stopped in his tracks, pulling his punches instead of continuing to press his advantage. Right as everyone was wondering why he had relented all of a sudden, another Qi Shou appeared around 30 meters away from the Qi Shou on the ground. His Yin soul had been released from his body. Clearly, he had used some type of secret technique. Otherwise, given that all swordsmen were extremely sensitive to even minute shifts in aura, there was no way that he could have released his Yin soul without detection. Qi Shou's Yin soul reached out expressionlessly with one hand to make a grabbing motion, and the sword on his physical body's back instantly flew out of its scabbard and into his grasp. The sword's name was High Radiance, and it was one of the Qi clan's pseudo-celestial weapons. It was said that the sword had been forged using the godly body spinal column of a deity of fire from the ancient heavenly court. Apparently, one of the Qi clan's old ancestors had obtained the deity's remains by chance before refining the spinal column in question for over 100 years to forge this sword. Qi Shou had immediately come into possession of the sword upon his birth. "Do you still want to continue?" Qi Shou's Yin soul asked as it held High Radiance firmly in its grasp. Everyone turned to Chen Pingan for his response, and they were stunned by what they saw. Even Dai Zhang, who was definitely no stranger to physical punishment, couldn't help but shudder at the sight of Chen Pingan's condition. Chen Pingan's right hand had been stripped completely down to the bone, but he didn't seem to have noticed at all as he picked up Qi Shou's body from the ground, then casually tossed it at his Yin soul. He then stood with his left hand clasped behind his back, and his right hand clenched into a loose fist against his abdomen. All the while, blood was flowing down from his mangled arm along his skeletal fingers onto the ground. Qi Shou's Yin soul instantly returned to his body. Chen Pingan raised his unsightly arm then yelled, "Come!" A pillar of golden light erupted into the heavens from the Ning Manor in the distance, and what sounded like a string of rumbling thunderclaps rang out as a streak of golden radiance raced through the air before arriving in Chen Pingan's grasp. The trail of sword Qi left behind was so immense that even after the sword had already been caught in Chen Pingan's grasp, the long line of golden light that it left behind continued to linger. Qi Shou's entire face was covered in blood and filth, but he was too stunned and enraged to care as he yelled, "Who lent you that celestial weapon?" The golden sword in Chen Pingan's hand was none other than Sword Immortal, and it was ringing and buzzing incessantly, seemingly ecstatic at the fact that it had finally been called upon in battle again after so long. The golden radiance emanating from the sword was so incredibly bright that it made it appear as if Chen Pingan were holding a miniature sun in his hand. "High radiance? Just how high is your sword's radiance?" "Only the light of the sun can compare with the radiance of my sword." A calm smile appeared on Chen Pingan's face as he said, "If your surname wasn't Qi, you'd still be lying on the ground right now. You had a pseudo-celestial weapon handed to you because you were born into affluence and privilege, whereas I had to earn this sword with my life. I now turn your question back to you. Do you still want to continue?" At some point, the one-eyed sword immortal had returned to his chair in the completely demolished wine shop, and he picked up a relatively intact bowl before pouring himself some wine as he said to Qi Shou, "If you've lost, then you have to concede. No direct descendant of the Qi clan has ever died north of the city walls." Qi Shou sheathed his sword as he made his way down the street, and as he passed Chen Pingan by, he challenged, "Do you dare to arrange a time for a rematch?" Among all of his peers on the Sword Qi Great Wall, he was the one who had the best chance of reaching the nascent tier first even before Ning Yao. The problem with Ning Yao's cultivation was that she had to do too many things. Qi refinement had never been a problem for her. Instead, the item refinement element of her cultivation was what had always been slowing down her progress. If Qi could fight Chen Pingan again after reaching the nascent tier, then the outcome of the battle would be a foregone conclusion from the very beginning. How about you choose the location, and I'll pick the time? Chen Pingan asked, making a counterproposal. Qi was almost unable to suppress the mouthful of blood fighting to force its way out through his throat. Without another word, he trudged his way on foot to the end of the street before rounding the corner, seemingly intentionally choosing to prolong his own humiliation by refraining from taking flight. Trailing along behind him was a group of lackeys, all of whom looked even more distraught than he did. Chen Pingan turned to Ning Yao with a wide smile, only to receive a displeased glare in response. Chen Pingan then cast his gaze over his surroundings. Strangely enough, aside from his ancestral residence on Clay Vase Alley and the bamboo building on Downtrodden Mountain, this was the place where he felt most free and uninhibited, and that gave him the courage to freely swing his fists and draw his swords. The reason for this was that the Sword Qi Great Wall was a very pure place. Sure, it was more dangerous here than just about anywhere else, but it was nowhere near as complicated as the majestic world, and there was far less to be considered. Furthermore, residing atop the Sword Qi Great Wall was the old Great Sword Immortal, who had once personally taught him how to be unreasonable. This was followed by a demonstration, during which the old Great Sword Immortal had casually sent a streak of sword qi raining down from the heavens to kill an upper 5-tier swordsman from a prominent clan. On the Sword Qi Great Wall, Qin Qingdu was the highest principal there was. Chen Pingan earnestly respected and admired the old immortal, and he hoped to also be able to someday attain such immense power that he could lash out with his fists and his swords without any qualms or inhibitions. Furthermore, this was a place where Aoyang had once stayed for many years, and Chen Pingan would be doing a disservice to this sacred place if he were too hesitant with his fists or too slow with his swords. Chen Pingan took a deep breath, feeling quite exhilarated, but it still wasn't enough. Peng Yuanji was just about to depart when, to his surprise, Chen Pingan turned to him with a faint smile. "You don't feel like you're placing yourself at a disadvantage?" Peng Yuanji asked with a smile. The previous victory had not come easily. Everyone on the street watched as Chen Pingan pierced Sword Immortal into the ground, then released it and beckoned to Peng Yuanji as he replied, "On the contrary, I'm worried you're the one who feels at a disadvantage." This bold declaration was very amusing to the Sword Immortals present, and Peng Yuanji stepped out onto the middle of the street from the wine shop with a wide smile as he cupped his fist in a salute and declared, "I am Peng Yuanji of the Sword Qi Great Wall. Please enlighten me." Chen Pingan thought about it for a moment, then returned the salute as he declared with a serious expression, "I am Chen Pingan, the one liked by Ning Yao. Please enlighten me." Peng Yuanji joined his middle and index fingers, then held them in front of himself as he smiled and said, "I don't have many flying swords, just one in fact. However, I'm sure it's fast enough that it won't disappoint you." A flowing stream of sword qi arose over the street, trickling along in a wonky and haphazard fashion before finally spreading out into a river. The sword intent was pervasive, and all of the patrons of the wine shops that lined the street felt a bone-chilling sensation creep into their bodies. Everyone knew that Peng Yuanji had been chosen by the hidden official as her disciple not by chance or out of dumb luck. Instead, in the past century, he was the young prodigy who had the best hopes of becoming her heir. Peng Yuanji's bonded flying sword was simply called Time. Time flowed like water, so his bonded flying sword possessed no set shape or form, just like water and time. At the very least, Qishu's jumping spider was still quantifiable, whereas time was downright unreasonable, and its most incredible trait wasn't its innate power. Instead, thanks to time's unique characteristics, Peng Yuanji was able to master all immortal techniques, and that wasn't even to mention time's ability to enhance his rate of progress in soul and bodily refinement, as well as cultivation. Additionally, Peng Yuanji had displayed stunning cultivation aptitude ever since he was a child, so he had mastered an extremely broad range of immortal techniques, giving him the nickname of Hundred Schools Peng. Unlike Qishu, Peng Yuanji wasn't wearing a Dao robe. He didn't have a pseudo-celestial weapon that came with his surname, nor did he have any militarian armor pellets up his sleeve. Chen Pingan casually walked forward, his fist aura spilling out around as he made his way upstream against the opposing river of sword qi. As his fist intent clashed against Pang Yuanji's sword qi, the air around him shimmered and warped, and as a result, the spectators of insufficient cultivation bases were soon unable to even see him clearly. The scene on the street was like a reflection on the surface of a disturbed lake, making it impossible for some to make out finer details. I'll tell you all the details about how Chen Pingan won that fight and why Qishou lost when we get back, Ningyao said in a quiet voice. Yanzhuo was staring at Chen Pingan in a daze, his eyes glowing with admiration as he declared with full conviction, "As long as Brother Pingan is willing to fight, I'm confident he can beat anyone. Isn't that right, Sancho? Weren't you saying something earlier about how he had no chance against Qishou with high radiance on his back?" "Did I say that? I don't recall," Chen Sancho denied with an innocent expression. "It must have been Dong Huafu." "Shut the fuck up," Dong Huafu snapped. "Did your mother raise you to be a dirty-ass liar?" Daizhong could only shake her head in exasperation. Out of their circle of friends, Dong Huafu was the one who had spent the most time with Aoyang, and he was probably the only one on the Sword Qi Great Wall who had ever taken a piss on Aoyang. Hence, whenever he decided to tear into someone, he would unleash a barrage of patented insults that he had learned straight from Aoyang's mouth. For those who didn't know him, suddenly being subjected to one of his tirades would be a nasty shock, but thankfully, his friends and those close to him were already accustomed to his foul mouth. A middle-aged sword immortal arrived at the destroyed wine shop, then sat down beside the one-eyed man. After dusting off the table with his sleeve, he smiled as he nodded in approval and praised. "The purity of his fist intent and fist aura is very impressive. I struggle to imagine how Chao Ci was able to beat him thrice in a row." The one-eyed man had been kicked in the head earlier by the hidden official, but that didn't seem to have harmed him physically or bruised his ego at all, and he continued to drink in a composed manner as he replied, "That's because you came here too late. If you had been around to see Chao Ci practicing his fist techniques on the city walls, you wouldn't struggle to imagine such a feat at all. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest no matter how high Chao Ci ascends and how quickly he gets there." Having said that, this young man is also an exceptional talent in his own right. During his last visit 10 years ago, I saw him practicing his fist techniques on the city walls as well, and back then I never thought that he would be able to achieve what he has today. I may not have believed it even if the great old sword immortal had told me at the time. The middle-aged sword immortal had only recently arrived on the Sword Qi Great Wall from the southern world continent, and he smiled as he speculated, "I heard that he came from the Jewel Small World on the eastern treasured Vile continent. I wonder if he has any relation to feudal Lord Song Chongjing at all." "Not sure," the one-eyed man replied with a shake of his head. "He's clearly still very young, yet you can tell from a glance that he's been in plenty of fights. Are all of the pure martial artists in your majestic world constantly fighting day and night? Even if he received instructions and sparring practice from a powerful mentor, there's no way he can display this type of aura without truly regularly exposing himself to life and death situations. In fact, I'd say he looks much more like a native of the Sword Qi Great Wall than an outsider." The sword immortal from the southern world continent raised his bowl and gently touched it to the one-eyed man's, then mused. "The world is a massive place filled with extraordinary people and things. Even for someone like me who used to detest wine, I've developed a knack for drinking after coming here." A rare hint of resentment appeared on the one-eyed man's face as he sneered. "It's all because of that bastard Aoyang. He's single-handedly responsible for what the drinking culture on the Sword Qi Great Wall has become. According to him, a single man who doesn't drink will never find a wife, and a sword immortal who doesn't drink will drop back down to the nascent tier. What a load of nonsense." The fourth battle was commencing right after the conclusion of the first three, and all of the spectators were thoroughly pleased. The little girl next to Dong Byud was slamming the windowsill repeatedly with the heel of her hand, her face flushed bright red with excitement as she yelled, "Did you see that? Did you all see that? Feel free to praise me for my foresight. Don't be shy." Everyone ignored her, and that left her feeling a little disgruntled, but before she had a chance to dwell on her displeasure, she suddenly noticed that there was a strange look on Dong Byud's face. "Big Sister Dong, are you feeling really bad because you've realized that Big Sister Ning found herself such a great man, while you're already so old, yet still have no suitable suitors?" she asked in an innocent and curious manner. "If that's the case, then you should learn from me. Whether you're happy or sad, you need to talk about it with someone. I can have a drink with you if that'll help. I can lend you some of my joy. Dongbud rested her chin on the windowsill as she heaved a forlorn sigh, then nodded as she conceded. It's true, I feel terrible. Even after all these years, I still haven't been able to beat Ning Yao in a single thing. Don't say that, the little girl consoled. You're older than big sister Ning. That's something that you'll always have over her. Dongbud turned and closed her hand around the little girl's throat, then lifted her up slightly as she smiled and asked, What did you just say? I couldn't quite hear you just now. The little girl was flailing with her feet lifted above the ground, and she was furious as she yelled, You better treat me with a bit more respect from now on, big sister Dong. You never know when I could end up as one of Chen Pingan's wives, and when that happens you'll be in big trouble. If he decides to stand up for me against all of your bullying, then he's going to make you bounce around all over the place just like he did to Qishou, while I'll be powerless to do anything but watch. Dongbud planted the girl firmly back onto the ground as she sighed in exasperation. What on earth is all this nonsense coming out of your mouth? Go and say that to Ning Yao if you dare. I wouldn't actually say this to big sister Ning. I'm not stupid. The girl scoffed with a roll of her eyes. I see the way he and big sister Ning look at each other. My mother often says that the men who are out of reach are the best men under the heavens. I know that she says that intentionally for my father to hear. And whenever she does, my father always pouts and sulks like he ate a fly or something. He doesn't dare to rebuke her, nor can he beat her in a fight, and it's not like this is something to seriously get angry over anyway, so the only thing he can do is suffer in silence. Dongbud pressed a hand down onto the little girl's head, forcing her to kowtow repeatedly against the windowsill once again as she grumbled. Little girls like you shouldn't go around running their mouths everywhere. Are you not afraid of being beaten by your parents? After Dongbud finally relented, the little girl rubbed her own red and swollen forehead in a frustrated manner, as she clenched her fists tightly before pounding them down onto the windowsill. I won't let you keep doing this to me. I've decided to go and learn martial arts from him after he beats Peng Yuanji. If he refuses to teach me, then I'll kneel in front of big sister Ning's house for at least a few minutes to show him my sincerity. Once I've learned his fist techniques, you better be careful when you walk home at night, big sister Dong. Even Dongbud had no idea what to do with the little girl. The latter seemed to have a hole in her head, one that couldn't be filled with principles. Quite a few sword immortals have come to spectate the battle, Dongbud suddenly remarked. The little girl was just about to say something when Dongbud wound an arm around her neck in a light stranglehold, and the little girl cocked her head to the side, rolled her eyes and stuck out her tongue to play dead. On the street outside, Chen Pingan was doing something rather strange. He wasn't taking advantage of his superior speed and physical constitution as a martial artist to force his way toward Peng Yuanji, thereby closing the gap between them. Instead, he had pulled out a large stack of ordinary yellow paper talismans, which was tossed out by the handful, throwing out around 40 to 50 talismans of all descriptions at a time. All of the talismans were instantly destroyed by Peng Yuanji's sword qi, but Chen Pingan wasn't discouraged in the slightest as he continued to walk along at a slow and leisurely pace. However, in contrast with his lethargic walking pace, he was throwing out talismans with much more speed and urgency, to the point that his hands were nothing more than a pair of indistinct blurs. Peng Yuanji smiled as he made a hand seal, and another Peng Yuanji appeared behind Chen Pingan. At the same time, 12 more Peng Yuanjis appeared on the rooftops that lined the street. Every single one of those Peng Yuanjis was making either a Taoist or Buddhist hand seal, and each of them had a formation beneath their feet. The formations were connected by thin threads of different colors, forming a massive formation that encompassed the entire street. Immediately thereafter, the two Peng Yuanjis standing behind and in front of Chen Pingan began slowly walking forward, and as they did so, they began casually inscribing talismans into the air around them. Before long, they were both surrounded by countless talismans, the cores of all of which were glowing radiantly. Some of the talismans were rippling with spiritual energy, some were flashing with arcs of lightning, some were encircled by miniature fiery dragons. It was an extremely diverse range of talismans of all descriptions, presenting a mesmerizing sight to behold. All of a sudden, Chen Pingan tossed out one final batch of over 100 yellow paper talismans at once, then abruptly stopped in his tracks and adopted his fist stance again. All of the immense fist intent swirling around him instantly became restrained and withdrawn, like a sword returned to its scabbard, following which he threw an almighty punch, his fist shooting forward like a speeding arrow. The river of sword chi flowing over the entire street shuddered and rippled violently, and the majority of the sword chi instantly converged around Chen Pingan like an army surrounding and laying siege to a city. The two Peng Yuanjis on the street remained calm and unhurried, walking along at a leisurely pace as they continued to fortify the formation. After watching the past 3 battles, Peng Yuanji had concluded that Chen Pingan was someone with a wide range of tricks up his sleeve in battle, and most importantly, he was still hiding his true power. For example, he had not yet thrown a punch with his left fist, and Peng Yuanji was certain he had not yet displayed the full extent of his speed. There were many red herrings that Chen Pingan had intentionally thrown out during his battle against Qishou, and outside of the sword immortals present, perhaps Ning Yao and Peng Yuanji were the only ones to have identified this. Deep down, Peng Yuanji was feeling a little exasperated. Chen Pingan was a pure martial artist and a lower 5 tiers chi refiner. Yet not only did he possess a bonded flying sword that had undergone advanced refinement, but what was the deal with those 2 replica flying swords? Did he have any more of those that he was yet to reveal? Peng Yuanji felt like Chen Pingan was perfectly capable of doing something so shady and underhanded. Furthermore, what made Peng Yuanji feel even more apprehensive was the strategy that Chen Pingan had adopted at the beginning of the battle. To the untrained eye, it appeared as if Chen Pingan had wasted a bunch of talismans for nothing, but in reality, he had done that to meticulously examine all of the minute details in the flow of the river of sword chi around him. This was why Peng Yuanji had withdrawn all of his sword chi without any hesitation to deprive Chen Pingan of the opportunity to gather more information. Back in the Ning Manor, Nalin Yeshing was currently crouched down on the sparring platform, gently rubbing the ground with his fingers. Bai Lianshuang was standing beside him with an agitated look on her face as she yelled, "Why haven't you gone to keep an eye on things, you old dog? What happens if something goes wrong? No matter how dangerous things get over there, it won't be as dangerous as the southern battlefields," Nalin Yeshing said in a composed manner. Bai Lianshuang was even more enraged upon hearing this. If things get out of hand, young Master Chen won't be in any less danger than if he were on the battlefield. Do you really not understand the severity of the situation? Or are you just playing dumb with me? Nalin Yeshing offered no response. Bai Lianshuang's tone softened slightly as she sighed. Have you not considered that for a young man as brilliant as young Master Chen, he could easily marry into any other clan on the Sword Chi Great Wall without having to go through anywhere near this much trouble? Any other clan in the position of our Ning clan would be doing everything in their power to keep him safe. Yet here you are, standing around doing nothing. The Yao clan hasn't made a move yet, either, so that means that there's no one looking out for young Mistress Ning and young Master Chen right now. If something happens, it'll be too late for regrets. Old Man Yao is still holding on to some resentment over past events, Nalin Yeshing said with a sigh. A hesitant look appeared on Bai Lianshuang's face as she tentatively suggested, "How about we tell the Yao clan what young Master Chen has offered up as marriage gifts? Maybe they'll be inclined to stand up for him then." "Don't you ever insult Chen Pingan and the Yao clan like that," Nalin Yeshing snapped in a cold voice, putting on a rare display of force and authority when he was normally much more timid in Bai Lianshuang's presence.